Morning.
Good morning, everybody.
I got work to do.
It's my gavel, but I did it very lightly. 9 o'clock, ready to start the
Thank you,
budget
Mayor.
workshop number 3.
Yes.
Yes.
The last couple of workshops, the first workshop we had was general overview, revenue expenses, just general talk. Last budget session, we had specific presentations from police, fire, and parks and rec. This one is all Gil all the time. So basically, we're doing operations, which is going to be the operational components in the general fund and in the utility fund. What we'll end up with at the next meeting on the 16th is specific items that we're pulling out of the budget that I'll present to you regarding administration, general overview, where we're at since the first meeting on revenue and expenses and things like that. And then we'll have other opportunities to talk about rates and fee schedule, and that'll come up at the next meeting. So we're going to kick this off the same way we have on the other ones. Gil's going to get up and give a presentation. I do have...
Michael, do we have this in our box? For some reason, none of us seem to have a copy of this.
I like to write on mine.
Do we have?
No, we don't, but we can.
I'm happy to follow along, but I'm looking down the way and
He won't have his normal.
I'm sorry.
I remembered my pen today. But
Well, that's good.
I got my
Yeah,
pen.
give me 5 copies of it if you don't mind. I'm sorry about that. Yes,
You're all
you're,
asking, so I thought I'd ask. 'Cause
no, you're absolutely right. That was one that slipped by me.
I'm fine to save that printing
Means
copy.
I'm-
I'm- I'll spend the printing money for you. One thing that I want to make sure that you remember is I have the budget software up behind this presentation, so if you have specific questions that you want me to drill down into, we can do that. In the meantime, I think you'll find the information from Gil very helpful. Gil?
Good morning, Mayor, Council, staff. First of all, in the last couple of years, we've had some pretty significant changes in the operations department and the personnel. And I know we got some new members on council that may not know what everybody's responsibilities are. And I wanted to take just a moment of your time and introduce the staff to you because in January, I basically put the burden of telling me what they needed on each one of the supervisors of each one of the specific areas. And so, to start off with, the superintendent of the utilities is Mark Meyer. Mark, stand up. All right. And then we got Chris Nichols, who's over pumps, pump stations, wells. Scott Weber, stormwater. Okay. Then we got Bill Raymond, who's over the wastewater treatment plant. Okay. Gene Gaganas is the project manager that works for us. And then Brian Stanberry is the assistant director, and he also does the permits and a lot of stuff involving stormwater planning. And he works real close with Ed in the planning division, along and ties everything together with the public utilities. David Burkle, that used to work for stormwater, is now the supervisor of public works. So the stuff that you want done on Freeman Park and all the stuff around the boardwalk that constantly gets addressed, David is the person that's responsible for making sure that happens for you. Rebecca Wilkins is the administrative supervisor. She's over the customer service division. She deals with all the stuff with the clerk, the billing. And again, it's different people have got different jobs in the last couple of years. And these people actually, this is not my budget, it's our budget. So, all right. Without any further ado, first we got is environmental. Okay. Thank you, Ed. First slide we got is environmental, and we've actually taken everything in we had from last year to this year, again, where we increased our waste pickup for recyclables. It increased our waste industries contract by 3.71%, which basically, overall in this budget, it's a total of 12% increase for the entire year from last year's budget to this year's budget. We've included 2 trucks in this budget. Truck number 431, that's 14 years old, that half its life was spent on the beach, and the basically vehicle currently will not pass inspections due to the structural integrity of the frame. And truck number 485, that was the tan truck, that's 8 years old, and it's been on the beach assignment for the last 8 years. Now, a year ago, we started another project. We used to have a underwash operation to give our trucks and vehicles more life. We've just got that finished in the last 30 days. It's at the bridge barrier, and it is being utilized now by all our departments, police and fire. And so that's basically the reason we need to get those 2 trucks replaced. We've asked for 1 replacement backhoe for the environmental group. The town actually had 5 backhoes up to about a year ago. The JCB backhoes were 10, 11 years old, and it got to the point that the cost of maintenance exceeded the value of the vehicle. So all of the 5 JCBs were actually sold. Currently, and right now, we have 3 backhoes in our fleet that we own. And so we don't have one actually for environmental, and we'd like to have one.
You have 3 right now,
Yes, sir, we got 3 right now.
and you want to add another one?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
We've actually, in the last couple of years, we've been sharing equipment across the board between environmental, stormwater, utilities, and the wastewater plant. On a daily basis, we can run 4 backhoes, and some days 5, without any issues, just keeping our people busy. And at the next item was the gazebo repair and upgrade at the end of Canal and Starfish. Then we had the beach access improvements for $100,000.
Hey, Gil, we're spending that on beach access improvements. We do that about every year, don't we? About that much?
We've actually, 2 years ago, the council asked us to get the beach accesses sent out for potential contract, and Brian Stanbury and I put together some, like a scope, and sent out. Brian actually got some bids back, and they were like $300,000 and $400,000.
So when you show us $100,000, is that material or is that a labor cost or?
That's basically material, and we actually have the labor in-house. Lou
Right.
and
So
Lou and
that's
his
just
team.
materials.
That's just material.
Right, I understand. I just want to make sure everyone, because we're not, you've already got your labor included in all your other personnel and benefits. You're just saying some of that personnel uses $100,000 worth of materials to go rebuild those
Yes, sir.
crossovers.
And last year, we rebuilt the crossovers that we had an estimate on that went from $285,000 to about $325,000. And with Lou and David's assistance and everybody in the environmental, public utilities, public works section, we got all those done for approximately $98,000.
So Gil, when we're doing those as repairs and improvements, are we looking at elevating the ones that have started to get buried into the dune?
We haven't in the ones that we did this past year because they weren't the ones that needed elevation. Where we have problems are in the north end. They tend to collect more of the sand. So yes, we are looking at elevating, I think it was 4 of them that we identified
Yes,
this
sir.
year, along with skinning the rest of them. So last year, this current year, I'll say, we spent that $100,000 on skinning and repairing all the ones on the south end, which was about 16 for that $100,000.
But we didn't
So
elevate those because you're saying they weren't buried in the dune.
They weren't buried.
Okay.
They weren't a maintenance issue.
Gil, on this slide, you've got the waste industries contract highlighted at $1.6 million, but you didn't highlight anything else. What is there a reason you just wanted to draw our
We
attention to
just hit the
that?
highlights of the big items that's in the budget for this year. Mr. Kramer actually has sent you guys a detailed budget, a summary of everything that we've got in the entire.
So, but
environmental section.
if I just do some quick math, 3.7% of 1.7 million dollars is about $63,000. That's what our increase was for doing the double recycle. So it wasn't, we didn't
The total increase for Waste Industries contract was 3.7%. That was partly the increase in recycling, which is, like you said, about $65,000 or so. And then the rest of that was a 1.6% increase this
Okay.
year for
So,
their charge to us.
but what we always look at on these budgets is the costs. What we haven't seen, and just to remind myself, we get an offset on that cost by what we bill our residents for the for the trash, right?
Yes, we don't make money, but we break even.
What are we paying for municipal trash service? What does the town pay for our trash service?
Couldn't tell you.
My understanding was we were subsidizing the town's cost through the contract. So I'm just bringing that up. So when we come back to the Waste Industries contract or redo it, the question is, if it costs a resident $6 a week, but some of that goes to offset the town's cost, I've been asked, is that appropriate?
Yes, it's appropriate. Is there a particular dollar figure that I can give you? No, there isn't. Actually, when the original contract was set up way back in the 90s, the original charges that the town issued to their customers had embedded in it some formula of, yes, you would have X amount of an increase or X amount that would go towards town-issued costs. But I have no documentation of what that is. So I can't reproduce it for you. Right now,
I'm sorry, but you can take whatever waste that goes out of the town and calculate what that would be if you had to pay for it.
I can definitely tell you how much the cost is for the town services. We actually have our bill broken up now and have had for the last couple of years into residential, commercial, and town and municipal waste.
So
That
does
way
the
we
town
can,
actually write a check every month for
Right.
trash?
well, the town doesn't write a check just for municipal trash. We write a check for all three of those categories together.
Okay, does the town check that is written for all three of those categories include the municipal cost?
Yes.
And is the municipal cost all the blue barrels up and down the beach and all the other commercial or all the other municipal trash throughout town? Because my understanding was
Yes.
the town was not paying the same rate as commercial businesses or residential. So I would just tell you, when it comes time.
I'm
to
not
look
real
at-
sure where that information is coming from, but as far as I know, we're paying the same rate if we have a 8-yard dumpster
Okay.
as anybody else on the island.
Well, that's good, because I mean, it's, as you said, it was set up 10, 12, 14 years ago. My
And,
understanding was.
and the ideal would be is that you would determine at the beginning of your contract how much you are going to have those accounts fund your municipal waste service, or if that municipal waste service strictly comes out of general fund and isn't part of, out of the services that are supplied to the residents.
What you're saying is you're comfortable that if we get a bill that's a third, the town is contributing a third of that cost. And so at some point, you have a breakout that shows all the different costs that we're incurring as a community.
Yes.
Okay.
So
That's great.
are you just making an estimate then on what the Freeman Park is costing us in trash?
Yes, basically, and the only way that we're able to do that is because we're currently using the pods. We're able to go and calculate how many times they come and pick up a pod or the number of pods that they pick up, and those pods are only used on Freeman Park. So we're able to calculate it in that way.
Right, but are we actually paying for it, is my question? Or I hear you saying something different, that it's built into the contract.
It is a charge paid by the town. The residents and the commercial businesses, I believe, are paying part of those costs, are giving us revenue. I cannot tell you how it was calculated at the beginning and
So-
how much of the
And that was
revenue
my email
goes.
to you a couple weeks ago. And so somebody's got to know how it's calculated, whether it be Waste Industries, but
This
I
is
was
not a
told
charge
years
against
ago.
your time, Gil.
Just hang on. I was told years ago that it was subsidized by the commercial dumpsters, but it's really unfair that we can't tell those people how.
Yes, it is, and I can't tell you how.
Okay,
And so
so
my-
And
who
I have
can?
no documentation
Hold
of
on.
how it was
So
calculated
can Waste
before.
Industries, who wrote the
No.
contract?
It's a baseline contract that was done in 92,
So when does our contract expire?
end of this year.
Okay, so we'll be looking at doing another one.
Most
ma'am.
definitely, we'll be going through the process of an RFP
Right.
for services, and then we'll be able to identify exactly what the charges are, how much we want to charge the residents, and whether or not at that point you want to have the residents and the customers, the commercial customers, subsidizing the trash collection for the municipal trash.
So then my question would be, if we have a 3.71 increase, how are we covering that?
Currently, we have an increase in the 1.6% that'll go against your bill. So everybody's bill will go up 1.6%. With the $63,000 or so that is additional recycling costs, additional pickup that we charge, we put that onto the customer's bill. So all of that is being covered by the customer's bill.
Now, Michael, are you doing that on all customers or just those that are now receiving an additional pickup?
All the ones that are receiving the additional pickup for recycling.
As you know, historically, the North End has always had twice a week pickup. So they've already been billed twice a week.
For garbage, yes.
Well, they come by twice a week for everything. So anyway, I'm just telling you, we're going to have a big conversation when it comes time for the trash service.
What do you mean? I only get picked up once a week.
Well, on the North End, they come by on Mondays and Thursdays.
There are segments of the.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, there's
My bill's
segments.
twice what yours is because they come by twice, which is fine. I mean, I don't care, but, I mean, I care, but
There's a lot of things wrong with
What?
the,
I think you care.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Gil.
there's several things on the current contract that need to be corrected. And again, like Mr. Kramer said, it's probably 15, 16 years old. So we really need to take some time and make sure we go over the new contract, we review it, and it is what we want for the residents. And we can document and justify any of the costs that come out and who they go to. So that's one thing I'm looking forward to, is working on this new contract during the next couple of
And I
months.
think that's why you're getting a lot of questions, particularly from, we've been hearing it for a long time.
Long time.
And so I don't want to, I know you're not planning to do that, but I don't want to wait until November to start talking about it. Let's wait as soon as the season's
The
over.
environmental group just inherited the contract, and, and it goes through billing. It's like 6 or 7 different hands all get involved in this waste industry's, application, not necessarily the contract. But that's why we need to look at
But
it.
it
and
is
make
an
sure it's
offset number. The
contract.
1.6 is offset by revenues.
Yes, that's correct.
Right.
Gil, apologize for just a split second. So to make this clarified for those listening and myself, Steve, so what we're saying is that out of that third, and third, the third that we're paying, a portion of what we're paying is actually residents' revenue that we're putting our third going towards it.
Yes, basically either residents or commercial.
So it's third,
Charges.
and third.
Well,
but the
I
third
just use
we're
that as a
paying-
hypothetical. It's whatever the pro
Okay.
rata share is. If we have 100 cans and the residents have 1,000, but what's always been conveyed to me from previous management and staff and people in town is the residents in the commercial are subsidizing the town's collection. If the town is collecting X,
Yep.
they're only paying X minus.
Okay.
And the idea should be, it should be X. Now, that's going to impact the budget. That means the general fund somewhere is going to have to pay for it.
Yeah.
Right.
But
And that's where I can't, that's where I can't quantify for
Right.
you how it was set up and what percentage it was based on, because it was done so long ago. I have no documentation of it. So what we've been doing each year that we get increases from the service provider is just adding that on to the service total, right? And saying, okay, each customer gets an additional 1.6% or whatever the case may be. And so, yes, basically, all the customers, whether it's commercial or residential, have been subsidizing the town's municipal waste service for all these years. That was just how it was set up. Can it change? Yes, of course it can change.
That'll be a condition in the RFP that goes out to be able to identify the.
Well, yes, they'll be able to identify the amounts and the different categories and
Well,
things like that.
my, and not to take away from Gil's time and get too far down this rabbit hole, but my inclination would be to identify the town as similar to any other customer. The town has X number of trash cans, they're picked up X number of days, They have X number of dumpsters. They're paying X number per dumpster. It should be the same as everyone else.
I just
And
wanted
if
the
Michael tells
clarification,
me
thanks.
he can't come up with a report that shows exactly those costs, then I'm concerned that at some point, now, keep in mind, if the municipal costs go up for trash collection, that's coming out of the general fund. But as Ms. Pierce just pointed out, we get more trash on the beach. It isn't from our residents. So we get more visitors, more trash, and the town keeps subsidizing that cost of our visitors. And that isn't, I'm just saying at some point, Michael, we need to have a very thorough examination of that, and because
Certainly, it's a policy decision on how you want to pay for that collection, whether it comes directly out of the general fund or whether it's subsidized through your other fees.
or we could just go to the almighty ROT.
Yeah, there's always
Thinking the
that.
same thing.
There's always,
Well,
yeah.
But yes, that's a
Kinda like
policy.
asking Hannah to do everything. Every
Yeah.
time we get a new project, give it to Hannah. So we'll
That,
just give this
that's
charge
definitely a
to-
policy decision that we can look into. My guess is that as soon as we get done with the budget in July, what I'll be bringing you is an RFP so you can review it and say, okay, here are the services that we're providing and how we want to collect the information and what information we want to get from that contractor, because that was something else that was not in the contract, is what information we get from the contractor on a regular basis. It wasn't in the contract. So we're sort of at their mercy right now. I'd rather much tell them, I want to see X, Y, and
Black
Z
and white.
information.
and that's like the pods and all the blue trash cans and barrels we pick up on Freeman Park. That should be something charged to the Freeman Park Fund. But that's where it come from, and we gotta.
Well, my understanding is it is. I mean, there's a big contribution from Freeman Park for operations, which my assumption was that's for the labor, the equipment, and trash. Are we,
We are not contributing back to the Freeman Park Fund for that. The only thing that you'll see in the budget that is under Freeman Park for beach maintenance is general overview costs, and that's about $85,000. So that doesn't include things like the employees that are used for that.
so wait a minute. You're telling me out of the $1.3 million that we collect at Freeman Park, and you have X number of dollars going to operation, none of that includes trash pickup?
Tingling.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. All the trash pickup comes strictly out of environmental.
Does environmental get reimbursed from Freeman Park?
No, they don't, because we changed it from a tourism fund and having a separate funding mechanism to all in the general fund just before I got here. So all of it's paid out of the
Let's not
same
get down that rabbit
fund.
hole today, Michael, but it has been our understanding for years that the Freeman Park, the $1.3 million that we're bringing in, when we say operations, that includes Brian's personnel, the time for them to go out there and pick up the trash, the guy that has the trash truck, the barrel truck, the dumpsters. Tom, isn't that what you thought we were paying out of operations in Freeman
Yeah,
Park?
I did, but apparently that's
The
not
hauling costs, the
correct.
dumping costs, we're not paying any of that out of the Freeman Park revenue?
No,
Or are we spending $285,000 in operations and park? I mean,
the employee piece of the Freeman Park is strictly police.
no, you had a different employee, and well, let's go with Gil, but we're going to have that conversation, Michael, because that is not. Leanne, is that what you understood?
It's not, well, that's why I asked the question a while ago, is that the amount of trash that comes off of Freeman Park? Is that and that's what we need, sorry, and I like to go with Gil's
Apologies,
phrase, by the
Gil.
way, but we got to have accurate numbers on Freeman Park to be able to do what we're trying to do.
And at this point, the only thing that you have is reported information that we pull out of the books from different places to tell you how much it costs to run Freeman Park. Not how much we actually charge.
If you
in
didn't use
Freeman
the books,
Park.
what I would do if I didn't use the books, I would just use math and figure out how many people are out there and do a rough, just kind of a guesstimate of what it is.
Yes,
And
you're
see
at-
if it's close. I don't know.
You're asking us to run it like a utility, which it's not, but yes,
No,
I can do
what
that.
I'm asking you for, Michael, is when you say you get out in public, and we had this big conversation the last couple months about Freeman Park. It brings in $1.3 million. We set 350 into a sand fund. We put 265 into the general fund, and the rest of it we spend on lifeguards, trash, police, and fire.
Mm-hmm.
But now you're telling me we're not spending it on trash. We're not spending it on operation dollars. We're spending, you said the personnel money was all police, but you have a separate line item in that 700 and some $1,000. Break down the 750, 800, 600, whatever we're spending at Freeman Park. Show me how we're spending that and not paying or crediting Gil's environmental people for labor and trash.
It's all under general fund. There isn't anything to credit. But yes, I can break it out and show you how many
Let's put it
people are
on
being
one
used on
separate
what.
meeting.
Are you guys tracking any of this? Am I the
100%.
only one that's out there in left field on this?
100%.
You're not out in left field. You're just asking a question that I can't provide you an answer for right now. I understand what you're asking.
My question is $750,000 out of the Freeman Park. Show me how that's being spent.
Okay?
Okay.
And I
'Cause
think
that's
we
not,
ta-
I mean, that wasn't the understanding, and it all revolves around this trash, Gil, and not to
Well,
take away
we
your
talked
time,
about
but-
this at, I think, one of our last meetings or workshop, and I think you're working on that anyway, right? We talked about getting an accounting of all that. Okay, so,
All right, we have any more questions on the environmental?
What else
side?
you got?
Slide number 1?
Yes, I have a quick question.
All right, sir.
The 100,000 you said that's materials.
Yes, sir.
Is that wood?
Yes, sir.
Have we thought about switching up to PVC like people are using on their decks?
We've looked at several things. We're working with CAMA at certain components that we cannot use, and certain things we can use. Matter of fact, last year we had to work with them pretty extensively just to replace some posts in the ground. And it's certain types of treated wood that they will allow us to use and certain types they will not allow us to use. So because of the federal and state guidelines, we're trying to put everything back, the best quality product we can put back to have the most longevity out of it. I mean, I wish we could use the boards we've been using as part of the benches and stuff that's got a much longer longevity to it. But if we do that, this price would go probably to $200,000 or $300,000.
But then how long would that last? If we'd spend 100,000 a year on that material, we could put something better that we know the next 4 years is going to cut the cost
A lot of the
longevity-wise.
places we got the beach accesses, I think we could change material and have a longer longevity of the utilization. The components that, once they cross the dunes, have a tendency to get washed out with storms, whatever. So regardless what you put in short of concrete, it's still going to be pretty much destroyed, and you got to come back and be able to reconnect it in a relatively fast manner.
Keep in mind also that previous to last year or this current fiscal year where we spent $100,000, the town hasn't spent any substantial amount of funds to rehab the beach accesses. It would go for 10, 15 years. The types of activities that we would do out there is replace a board, nail in things, screw things down a little bit more, replace ones that are damaged by storms and things like that. But it wasn't resurfacing the entire operation. So the types of longevity you're getting out of these products, it all depends on how well you maintain them and what you're putting in. It's basically 15 years or more since the last time that they did improvements.
We've done it for the last couple of years, though, Michael, right?
This current year is the one that we spent the $100,000 on to improve 16 out of the 32 accesses. And then this next 100,000 will be this next fiscal year, and that will finish out redoing all of them.
Could that be pulled out of ROT in regards
So
to
there's-
activities?
32, you said? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yes, 32. Could it be pulled out of ROT?
These beach access allows for activities for our tourists and stuff onto our beaches. Is that something we can just keep throwing at them?
You can definitely throw everything at the ROT. You'll have, you'll,
Yeah, we can, right?
Aren't there grants for
So
the
this would be
improving
something.
beach access?
new beach accesses, yes,
Just new, not
not replacement or
rebuilding?
rebuilding.
Have we considered just doing away with them and letting them have a foot trail? We were just up in Pine Knoll Shores, and almost all of their beach accesses were just a foot trail.
No,
There
we
was no
haven't
wood
considered that.
structures. I'm just, I mean, just,
No, it's not been considered. They were placed there through CAMA grants, and we've been maintaining them ever since.
And the maintenance is our cost.
Yes.
That's not a bad idea.
I mean, we just,
Yeah.
Joe Dan and I spent some
I like
time,
the
and
look
we
of
went
that
out and looked
anyway.
at all those, and they're all, it sure saved Brian's guys some time.
It saves some time, but we got some places where we had substantial beach erosion where it's a substantial drop-off. And if we don't have some kind of structure, it's going to continue to increase the erosion. So we'd have to kind of have a mixed match. If we've done that, we kind of have to pick which areas we actually had a earthen type of access to.
I'm not a
But
proponent
that's
of it,
something we
I'm
could,
just
that's
asking the
something we could
question.
definitely look
I
at.
hate to ask another question about that, but you said there's 32, and we've done 16, and there's 4 more this year, and that's going to finish it. You're saying the other 10 doesn't need it?
No, the $100,000 is for the next 16.
Next 16.
4 of them will most likely need to be raised
gotcha. Okay.
above the level of the dune, because the dune's
So you're
encroaching
saying
on the,
within 2 years, we'll have addressed all 32 of them at some point, at some level?
If
Yes.
we don't have another event.
yes.
Right.
And then we're back to just maintenance on, damage and things of that nature.
Which has not been insignificant. I mean, Brian's guys have always done pretty substantial maintenance, rebuilding stairs. It's more than just replacing a board or two.
It takes an awful lot of time to go and replace stairs and things like that, especially on the beach side. There isn't a lot of activity that goes on the the mainland side. But yes, on the beach side, yes.
We should probably talk to Spencer Rogers and
Yeah.
some other guys about just going back to a natural trail. I understand the drop off, but I mean, they do it in a majority. A lot of other beaches don't do those wood walkovers. I think it's great that we have them in the central business district with the handicap accessible, and I think we should keep those. But if we're spending $100,000 in one lump sum this year, plus annually Brian's spending probably, I'm guessing there's more money buried in that budget for beach work every year anyway. You've just identified it this year.
Yeah.
I mean,
I mean, I agree with Steve and Joe Dan. I mean, I've been to beaches that are like that, and I like the more naturalness of it, to be honest with you, and less maintenance. But maybe as, we need to do these improvements, we just try it and take a few out.
Well, another thing we need to also consider is the dunes, because where we've got dunes established, we can't walk through over the dunes. So, anyway,
Sand pits or something?
it's definitely something we can address, something we can look
Look at.
at.
Well, doesn't the structure of the walkover actually help to catch some of the sand? And that's why we're having to raise it up?
Yes, and that's
I mean,
just
it's
what
like
we're doing is
it's
not
like a
disturbing the
sand
actual dune.
fence.
All right, Brian, I know you got a bid opening, and Scott had something. If y'all need to leave, you're welcome to leave. Yeah.
One thought, we get a substantial amount of complaints on the ADA aspect of it. That is, I like the idea. I've thought that for quite some time, but we do get a substantial amount every year. We have an access way go down to where they can't get over. We do get, staff gets a lot of phone calls about that. So it's just something to think of because it's somewhat limiting to those sites.
Couldn't we direct them, though, to, say, the boardwalk and say they're all accessible in that area?
You
You're gonna
could,
get
but
some
I mean,
pushback on that, I'm sure.
we have like
Somebody's not wanting to go down a quarter mile where they can have to go right,
I
here's
know, but
my
I don't know that
house.
it's
Yeah,
incumbent on
we,
us to
uh,
provide handicap
I agree.
access at every beach crossover to the tune of $100,000 a year or $50,000.
I understand that, but you've
And no,
established that.
Those beach crossovers are actually, if you walk up and down the beach and you see where the dune is 4 feet higher than the
Right.
crossover,
Right.
that's now created a problem. If we have a flood event, it's just gonna pour through those chutes rather than having a stable dune line. That's right. But anyway, we're taking.
Down the rabbit hole again.
Taking the old time.
Oh, I know Brian's got a bid opening he's got to go to, and if any other staff needs to go handle other business, you're welcome.
But this
to.
is really good conversation to give you guys idea of what we're thinking.
Well, that's the whole purpose of having some of the initial workshops. I'd rather had these discussions at the workshops prior than the budget workshop, so then we could present you some different ideas or different options. Again, we can't read your mind, so if you tell us what you want us to achieve and what you want us to work on, we can work toward that goal. Any other questions about the environmental?
You got more slides?
Okay,
Oh, yeah.
okay.
God, it's a thick package.
All right, the next one, we've got Public Works Admin. Pretty straightforward. Only 3 major items in that, and that's the EWE contract for all the electrical work that we do on the beach, around the lake, and town hall, a lot of other places. Sand and debris removal for $8,000. Boardwalk entranceway, landscaping $10,000, and the overall budget for this year is 23% decrease from last year.
Is that a flat contract? Is that what you're saying?
Say again?
Is that a flat contract? Is that what you're saying?
We basically don't have a flat contract. We took everything into consideration that we've had to do for the last couple of years.
You budget
and we've
for
had a
that?
budget.
and-
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And the reason you see a 23% decrease there is that last year, we replaced one vehicle out of the Public Works Administration budget. So that capital item was significantly higher than most of the budget here. It was $35,000.
We replaced Brown's 14-year-old rusty runaround Explorer.
No wonder he's never in the office now.
Yeah, right, out of the truck.
Any other questions for Public Works Administration?
No,
No, sir.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Okay. General fleet. We've looked at a lot of different things. We've tried to keep things consistent. We've been managing our vehicles much, much better than we have in years past. The equipment, the cost, the tires, we actually did see a slight increase in tires this year, and basically, the general fleet covers fire, police, public utilities, planning, and all everything else besides utilities. We've had several new police vehicles, and this year we actually had substantial increase in tire cost, and so we had to increase our tire line, I think, from 20 to 30,000, and we reduced our fuel. Looking at what we have this year, and the vehicle's going to come on, so again, I thought we managed it very well to provide
Does that
you a.
include all the backhoes and all the dump trucks and all the specialty
Part
equipment?
of the backhoes and part of the dump trucks are on this fleet. The utility has a different fleet because it's a different fund. Now, everything out of public works and everything out of fire and police and all goes through the general fund. So overall, we had a 7% increase, and which I do not feel is significant with what we had, with the number of vehicles that we're running and the fuel. And
How many vehicles are we running, Gil, in this fleet?
91, 99 out of this one.
Plus we have operations vehicles.
Yes, this right here is all the police, fire, everything in planning,
Parks and Recs.
parks and recs, the stuff we have to have for public works, public operations, but there's nothing out of utilities come out of it. Everything out of the wastewater fund, everything out of the water,
How
the
many
sewer,
vehicles we got
stormwater,
over
all comes out.
Any idea how many we have in the other fund?
You actually got a breakout of that a couple of days ago on both vehicles and equipment. Last thing I remember was about 52.
So we have 140, 150 some vehicles in the town.
I think that a lot of those,
52 would be 100 and
51.
and some of those are going to be equipment compared to vehicles rolling stock, but
how many employees do we have?
115.
Okay.
All right, any other questions on general fleet? All right, going to beach maintenance. Last year when I presented the beach maintenance slide, it included a lot of the different stuff that the manager actually has on another presentation that he will give to you. The beach maintenance component that is handled by the operation department is the porta-john replacement, the campsite repairs, the toilet maintenance, which is the paper, chemicals, and parking lot improvements on the beach side. And last year, the actual budget we had on that line last year,
Was 70,000.
yes, sir, was $70,000 for our component of it, and this year it's 85 based on everything we've got.
How much of that is charged, Michael, to Freeman Park?
Every bit of it.
Okay?
That's the one item for waste pickup, environmental operations that is charged to Freeman Park.
Parking lot improvements, is that something controlled by SP Plus in their contract?
No,
Not necessarily.
we do all the parking lot improvements. We put down the stops, we grade it, we put down gravel. We maintain the parking lot. SP Plus actually puts down the parking meters and manages the parking meters.
Okay.
But everything else, if it's anybody gets, damages something at the parking lots, or it has to be regraded, or wheel stops moved, that falls under the public utilities and public works section.
Quite often in the last couple of years, what we've used those resources for is fencing.
Any questions on beach maintenance?
Straightforward.
Okay.
Well, let me ask you real quick, since it is on my mind. When you say porta-john replacement, do we not rent those? Did we buy those?
No, ma'am, we buy them.
Okay, so some of them are damaged?
We have a fleet.
Well, I've heard.
We buy them. We buy them, and we basically maintain them. A lot of times, like last year, we had several that people physically tore up, ripped the hinges off of, totally damaged them on the
So,
north
Gil,
end. Sir,
How many do we have out on Freeman Park ballpark? 15? 18? 20? And how many do we own total?
probably close to 50, probably 60 total, if you count
wow.
those.
What are we doing with all the extra? I mean, what?
When we have,
Go
when we have special events, sometimes we have highs demand for 25 to be put out on a special event.
But, and that's one I want to say, why don't we just let them rent it from somebody else?
Well,
And
we've
we don't have to
tried-
have all these porta
Because
johns.
council talked about that a couple of years ago and decided not to do that.
Well, I don't like to see them sitting around like that. I mean, I just say, if you want to have an event, you go rent it from the porta john company.
I mean, yeah, all your contractors, every time they build a house, they have to have a porta-john
Right.
delivered. They don't call the town and rent one from the town.
No, they don't.
I mean, that puts us in another business we don't need to be in.
Well, I mean, it goes to
Maintaining porta johns.
Patrick's comment that he used to give us over there. We store all those at the off-site over here.
Barrier
off of
Ridge.
Barrier Road, and I do think that you have to have some extras, because when we get damage out at Freeman Park and whatnot.
Holiday weekend.
I don't know, I'm just, it's on the table again, Gil, just as a question,
How many do you get for 20,000? How much are
Say
they?
again?
Huh?
How many we get last year?
They roughly cost about $800.
About $750 to $850 a piece, depending on what's on them, and then we have to have so many that's handicapped.
So about 22?
Like the ones down at the public boat ramp, we actually do maintain those, and that's down there.
The boat ramp.
The handicap ones are almost twice as much because of the area and the components in them and the handrails and everything else. And basically, that's one discussion we've had on special events for several years, is letting them rent them. But, the council several years ago said, no, we want to keep our cost of an event down. So we have a very minimal cost for anybody that needs them. And when they do these marathons and stuff like that, they want one put here and put one there, and we get them placed.
I get it. I'm just saying it's a lot of time, it's a lot of maintenance, it's a lot of work on your people. I say if you're going to have an event, go rent a porta john. I would expect that if I went to a community personally.
Well, that would be a good
That's just
thing. That'd be
another thing,
something
Michael.
we could definitely consider.
Brainstorming.
But also like we don't have limited bathrooms like at the park. So we pretty much have a couple bathrooms that stay at the park for all the events.
I know
for
you got to
soccer.
have some. I know. You
And-
just
and
wouldn't have to store so many,
Yeah.
if
But
we
I still
didn't do
think you
that.
have to have some to support town
Sure.
activities.
Sure.
I'm just asking the question. That's the budget season, that's what I get to do.
How often do we budget this for replacements, that 20 grand? Is it every year?
No, sir. Basically, we went about 4 years without major replacement. We've had a couple of storms in the last 2 years. We've had significant damage. We had some that was 10 years old, and they're made out of a plastic component. Once it's exposed to sunlight for so long, the ultraviolet rays pretty much deteriorate the material, and it just gets really brittle, and it deteriorates. And so once in a while, you just have to put into recycle bin and send that to happy, Porta John land, and we'll buy you another one.
How many do you think we would need if we didn't do special events? Just for the town and the things around Freeman Park and.
Probably 40. Again,
But it
I'm
would
just
save
telling
you
you numbers off the top
manpower.
of my head. Now, I mean, I could sit down.
I understand.
If you really want to know how many we think we really could have to have at specific locations, we can find that out and bring it
No,
back
I
to you.
was just wondering if it's worth us doing that, because it sounds to me like a lot of time and work on your staff to clean them and take them to events and bring them back in and.
It is, but the only good thing about it is sometimes the Porta John companies, when you call them, it's like a waiting list, or I can't get to you, and it's got to sit there for 3 days. So like when we do the beach event we work with the chamber at Fort Fisher. A lot of different events, and all of a sudden in these Porta Johns, we have people that's very well trained, well equipped, can get them on position, get them filled, and have them operational in a matter of hours.
And the only reason I ask that, I'm sorry, I mean to interrupt you. The only reason I ask that question is I do have a lot of citizens complain all the time about seeing the porta johns and seeing them stored over there and, just.
Well, my bigger issue is the Freeman Park issue, where it's just an undue burden on our staff on the problem they've had to deal with on emptying those out of Freeman Park. I don't know what that, South End doesn't have porta johns. You go to the South End, well, I guess that's one choice.
Strictly a policy
I
decision.
understand.
You're
Right,
absolutely correct.
right. That's right.
We've
So-
made the
I think
policy.
that's why we're brainstorming now, Michael, is we're thinking about other things, but we need answers
But
from his
and the budget
department.
cycle, Michael, is one of the times when we actually see a number identified with an issue. We have these great issues that come up all the time, and we've heard that the horror stories of what staff has to deal with out on Freeman Park on porta-johns and the mistreatment out there. And to put that burden on our staff is like, what? And now to put a dollar amount.
Oh, I completely understand, and some of this, keep in mind, the town up until this past year has not had any way that we've actually tracked work orders or anything like that. In October, we started tracking our work orders in a system so that we can better educate council on, okay, how much cost is there for manpower, for equipment, for maintaining the porta-johns? Could I give you a basic number right now? Sure. You know, I know who it is and I can take their salary and I know what vehicle it is and I can take, but we haven't had a way to capture that in how many times do they go out, what do they do, that kind of thing, to give you a good full picture of cost for those things that do impact your policy decision.
Okay.
But City Works gives us that now.
CityWorks will give us that now. Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions on beach maintenance? If we don't, we'll have to order dinner.
Well, wait, just back up one more, just for a second. Campsite repairs, $10,000. Michael, the last time we looked at the revenue source for Freeman Park, we brought in $14,000 in camping. If it costs us $10,000 a year to provide camping,
We this past year, we brought in $144,000 in camping revenue.
that's right, I lost a zero
It
there.
lost to zero.
It basically
Yeah.
it basically
I'm rounding
cost
down.
us $10,000 to repair the
It's
posts
more
of
cost.
Way to
the road.
balance the budget.
I mean, I saw that $10,000 number, and I wasn't going to bring it up, but, I mean, what are we buying, rope and poles?
Rope,
I mean-
poles.
And signs.
I mean, that's a lot of repair for rope and, I mean, I'm just saying that for $10,000, that's a lot of whatever
Well, we've had-
4x4s and rope. Right?
Last year, we had week after week after week
I wanna
where
go
we
look,
replaced the
nitpick
ropes
that one apart.
every single week for probably 2 months. It's almost ridiculous, but
I mean, it's, twice the price
Camera
of the
allows
toilet
us
paper.
upgrade rope to chain.
Around toilet paper and chemicals for porta potties.
well, we possibly could, but if it's still the ropes, they'd probably rather have the chains.
They'll be pulling the chains to tow their cars.
I mean,
It would actually be a
last year
commodity.
Last year they cut the ropes.
It would be a
and
commodity.
Made canopy covers, and a couple of times they cut the ropes and wrapped them around the.
You already think the same thing.
The waste pods we had and hooked them to vehicles, so they pull the waste pods where they want them to next to their campsite.
More money for parking.
So just,
Electrical fence.
Thank you, Gil. We made it through 3 slides. Let's keep rocking.
There,
all right.
Yeah.
Utility fund, debt services. This right here shows a 25.5% overall increase. We've got the AMI project. We had the Vector truck. And
What's AMI mean?
That's the automated meter read system that we actually installed a couple years ago. And what this utility debt service does, Debbie can probably address that easier than anybody else, but as these things are went into a yearly payment plan, this much money needs to be budgeted each year to pay that debt off. So it's something that we may have started in 2014, 2012, and carried on for 5 years, 10 years.
So those are loan payments,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Yes.
That 500 and some is loan payments.
And that's the 25.5% increase, Gil, correct?
Yes, sir. And they-
What you'll notice in there is the list of subordinate debt. There is only one new item on there for this year, and that is the mower sweeper payment that is planned. All the rest of it, the 25% increase, basically is from the revenue bond increase, because we started out with just having interest payments on the debt, and once we get to a certain point, we're now paying principal and interest, and that's where the increase comes from.
And so do we have any idea on that 500, how much of those, I mean, do they fall off? Are we losing, like on, we just did the sewer authority, Gil, and we have a big number coming off this year and a bigger number next year. Do we have any idea when these start paying off?
Yes, you have that calculation in the information I sent you last week.
Which we've studied diligently, which is why
I know
asked
you
the
have.
question.
In our free time.
Yeah, I believe that 2 or 3 of them actually fall off in the next year. I think this is the last year for the Vector truck and the backhoes.
Well, that would be
And-
good if we're asking for another backhoe and we're still paying on 2 out of for.
And that would be a good discussion for the general fund, but this is utility debt and not the general fund. But yes, sir.
And just to comment, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yes, I believe the 114 comes off after this year.
And the 25% increase is not just the 500, it is also a revenue bond increase, is that not correct?
That is the revenue bonds, yes.
I
So the
think,
revenue bond went up,
Yes.
our payment, because we drew down more on the bond. We issued all those bonds, right? We generated all that
And
revenue, now we're
paying
spending it
Principal and interest.
because we've started spending it as the So do we have any idea what last year's revenue bond payment was? Debbie, ballpark, I mean, it was $1.5 million, did it go up $500,000 or? Because that's where we're setting the rate, right, Michael? I mean, that's where you're going to be heading to at some point.
Yes,
When our bond costs go up.
yes,
we're not-
that helps set the rate. And currently, we're at the planned 11.5% increase.
I think Steve asked a while back of a list of things that we have financed that are dropped, what it is, very simply, no complicated spreadsheet, which is the way I'd like to see it. Very simply what it is and maybe what fund it's coming out of and when it's due out. That would help us tremendously when people come in or in different departments ask for, more new vehicles and we really don't have any idea what's dropping off. And I think that would help us
I will-
all,
The
the whole.
spreadsheet he's actually prepared actually has like 5 and 10-year payment plans. It
Right.
shows you how much
Like
every
any
year.
standard vehicle.
And it's pretty simple when you look at it. And you
I
say,
can
okay,
try and repackage what I've already sent you to.
I understand you're saying you've already sent it to us, but it's hard when we gotta look through 12 places to find all these. If we could just have one thing with it all, it would help me.
Maybe that's something we need to do together on the screen and go through it. When we go through some of these. When you send it to us, honestly, it's catch as catch can for me on when I have time to sit down and
I agree.
digest all that stuff and look at it. And then I either got to print it out or I got to read it on my computer and then my phone rings and then I got to go to a Mac meeting or.
Right. And we're not trying to.
Here, you have my captive attention. and
We
that's what
can,
I'm asking.
we can definitely increase the length of these meetings to make it so we
Well,
can
that's
go
not,
through all those.
okay, so
I
what
mean,
I'm.
that's,
I
that's,
understand, but this is what I'm asking for, okay? I mean, whether it be land and,
I'm listening.
okay, good. Whether it be land and whether it be vehicles for each department in one place, not in every different department. I mean, it's something that could easily be updated by, Debbie could probably do it, and it'd be easily updated for every year that we ask these same questions.
And we have that. I'll redistribute it to you, then we can
Okay,
talk
because
about
you're
it at.
asking whether it's in the utility fund or you're asking in the general fund, we're asking for some new equipment. Now, sometimes we pay cash for the equipment, and sometimes we're financing it. So if we're financing a Vector truck and 2 backhoes, and that note's falling off, are we adding, it goes to the long-term compounding obligations that we're making to the
Debt
county. That's what the purpose of my question in the end was to say, what is our long-term impact?
It's just hard for me to look in 12 different, or I'm exaggerating, 6 different places. It would be nice if we just had one little thing maybe from you, Debbie, then.
Yeah, I have
Properties, vehicles, and what departments they go to.
I have a debt service schedule that I'd be
That's
happy to
perfect.
provide to you.
Perfect.
That gives you the details so you can see when everything's going to fall
I mean,
off
it's
and
hard
how
for
much
us to make, these decisions when we really don't know how it's the debt.
I could make a copy for you now if you'd like me to.
No,
just
not
so
right
I have
now.
it.
Apparently it was difficult.
And on that revenue bond, what was the duration of that revenue bond, Mr. Kramer?
Just like anybody else's.
20 years, I believe.
20 years. Okay. All right, any other questions on utility fund, debt service? Okay, water and sewer admin. On the water and sewer admin, managers asked for additional increase of $125,000 to the general fund, which generated an 8% increase overall budget for the water and sewer admin. So other than that, it's lower than last year. We've actually had a reduction in the Claris software maintenance contract. It was $25,000 last year. We've got it renegotiated. It's $22,400 this year. And
Michael, why did you increase the transfer by 125?
Because we're actually paying for more things out of the general fund for the utility. Things such as hardware, software. We have a various number of things that we pay for out of the general fund because it's honestly easier and more efficient to pay for it out of the general fund overall. and then we back charge that to the utility.
Joe Dan and Mayor Benson, a couple of years ago, we'd always had these transfers allocated for where utilities should be paying back to the general fund a pro rata share of Gill's cost and furniture, fixtures, and equipment that should be charged. That transfer was always on the books. It was never made. When Michael came on board, he said, we're going to make the transfer. That's how we got some of the money back into our general fund reserve account.
Okay.
Because in any business, you have admin and furniture, fixtures, and equipment, just like we do on the sewer authority. We charge the sewer authority for some share of different costs. We said it's perfectly appropriate for the town to charge the water and sewer authority for covering Gill's office space or a portion of it or whatever that was. So, and in the past, it was $600,000. Michael has to determine what goes into that, and that's why I was, why did he increase it? Because we're doing more. But it is, and I say that as an effort to help to answer your question on some other things, Jody.
Thank you.
That's why we're doing that.
And if you're interested, I can show you the calculation that we used to determine that 725 compared to the 600 that was
But
there.
it's
a couple
generally made
years
up
ago.
of a pro rata, a portion of different employees and office costs and paper clips and copy machines and vehicles or whatever.
That's correct.
Thank you.
It's defensible.
I would say everything in the budget's defensible, but yes, sir, it's defensible.
That's right.
It goes back to,
That's right.
Yes, sir.
But that's why, and and to Michael's credit, he's actually saying, we will write the check out of one authority into the
other.
well,
town.
and it's transparent. That's probably more.
Yes.
All right, any questions on water and sewer admin?
Thank you.
Move it on.
The next one is the wastewater treatment plant. Total budget, $1,275,033. Last year, we had two substantial projects that we done. One was installing the EQ basin. The second one was also putting in the wastewater discharge pipe. Those two projects alone totaled more than this year's total budget. But that actually went in part, that was part of the 30-year or the 20-year plan. So those were broken out into payments rather than being paid at one time. As we start into this year, again, we've not added any additional personnel. We've still got 5 full-time people with Bill Raymond in charge at the ORC. The Lewis Farms is actually for sludge removal, and we've actually entered a contract with them. We actually generated a contract, went to like 4 different providers, and Lewis Farms give us the best price and provide us the best service for the last year, and we just extended the contract with those guys, and it's $131,500. The slurry removal of the EQ basin, we added a second EQ basin last year, and there's sedimentation in the stuff that we put into the EQ basin, so every so often we have to go in and physically remove that slurry and dispose of it, because basically it's sludge, it settles to the bottom, and we have to do maintenance on that EQ basin. So that $10,000 is planned for that. In 2002, 2003 was the last time the wastewater treatment plant was upgraded. And since that time, there's a lot of water that's flown through that plant, and a lot of processes has went on. We've actually got to clarify work that's got to be done to plant number 2. We have 2 separate plants inside of the wastewater treatment plant. And if we had to, we could shut one side down and still operate and then do the other one. And Bill, both of them equivalent to about 1.5 million each, thereabouts, for the 2 plant sizes. So we could actually, during our low flow periods, and again, most of the maintenance we do at the wastewater plant has to be done from October till April. So we budget for it, we shut one side of the system down, still stay everything operational, and be able to clean and pretty much evacuate everything out of the other components. The headworks where all the grit and other stuff that flows down the pipe is actually separated before we treat the water. We've got mechanical bar screens there, we've got tubing, we've got pipe, and again, when you have water and sand running through something continuously for 18 years, it wears the piping out, wears components out. We've had two or three different engineers that worked with us recently to give us some quotes on rebuilding the headworks and grit chamber area for upgrade, and that was $35,000. The new sewer overflow for the EQ basin is approximately $60,000. Currently, right now, we have the sewer coming from Pump Station 1 at Raleigh Street. That's the main distribution line that comes into the plant. We also have the secondary line. There's 3 force mains that enter into the headworks. If we have substantial storms, a lot of times we actually route the sewer from the intake to the EQ basin. The way we do it now is we open a valve, it goes into a manhole, and it gravity flows to the EQ basin. If you open that valve a quarter turn too much, it will exfiltrate the manhole. And so we're going through a process now of having it so it's an extension of the force main, so we really won't have the potential of spills or any kind of environmental impact. So that is, the estimate we have for that one is about $60,000. Bill had a study done for the filter media, and back in 2002, 2003, the filter media that was put in the filter beds were anthracite. And that's actually the same sand that we use to treat water, potable water. It's got a small surface area, and they normally designed to last about 10 to 15 years. We've pretty much got the life out of that sand. They're so saturated and coated with bacteria and all the other components now that even though we can extend our backwashes, it really doesn't clean the media to a point. And we're starting to see elevated BODs, as we'd mentioned in the Sewer Authority meeting the other day. And by replacing this media, we're going to see a definite improvement in the water quality that's coming out of our plant going back into the river. We have a relatively low BOD, which is biological oxygen demand. It's one of our tests. We have CODs, BODs, and a whole list of other components. But right now, we really need to change the media in this next coming year to make sure we stay in compliance with state and federal regulations on the plant permits. The next one we had was the wastewater treatment plant diffusers. When you go to the plant, you see all these air bubbles coming up at the bottom. It takes a certain amount of oxygen injected into these plants so the bugs stay healthy, and we have rapid degradation of all the organics. After 15 years of utilization, 15 to 18 years of stuff, air flowing through these little diffusers, they are starting to break off, and once they start going into big bubbles or break the diffuser totally off, then we have bulking. It don't have the same effect. It affects the operation of the plant. So there's $25,000 budgeted there to fix that one. And the effluent chamber coating. If any have been to the wastewater plant, because most of you have, on the very tail end of the plant, we have the chlorine contact chamber that is actually in a configuration of a maze. The water goes in, and once the chlorine is injected, it needs approximately 30 minutes of contact time to totally sterilize the water. As it goes back and forth through that contact chamber before it goes out to effluent, then the water is totally sterile. Then we actually inject sulfur dioxide to dechlorinate the water before it goes out into the riverway. Over the last 2 years, again, in the EQ basin, the contact chamber is probably 25 or 30 years old because it was not redone in 2002. And it's got concrete walls on it. Okay? 40s? Okay. Okay. So it's been there since sometime in the late 1980s. And concrete has pitted some, and it's allowing for more growth to be in the walls. And when you put chlorine in and try to have 30 minutes of contact time, and you got any kind of plant life or any kind of other components inside of it, they absorb this chlorine because the chlorine's trying to stop that activity, which it's not doing its job with the water. So by cleaning and coating the interior chambers of that contact chamber, hopefully we can get another 40 or 50 years of life out of it and much more improvement of what we're having to do. We had 3 different quotes on that one, and the average of the quotes is about $150,000. So those are the components that we've submitted this year in the budget for the wastewater treatment plant. Everything that we've got here, we can provide you documentation if you need it, to bids, engineer reports, whatever. there's some small stuff that we may have to do this upcoming year, but I think this is a very good budget, and being able to maintain it in the same personnel and everything with only 1% increase being requested.
One thing to keep in mind about the wastewater treatment plant budget, you will see this kind of expenditure on a regular basis going forward for probably, I'm going to say, the next 10 years. And this is just a general working estimate. And the reason for that is we're maintaining infrastructure that at some point is 40 to 20 years old on average, and so we need to maintain them on a regular basis. So you'll see this kind of large project expenditure that is repair, replacement, and maintenance of existing infrastructure, not necessarily new infrastructure that we're putting in.
Okay, and we just completed putting down all the piles and secured the wastewater treatment plant discharge pipe that you guys approved for us to do this year in this budget. So we got it done. We got the permits from CAMA. We've got the piles in, and I think the 15th of May they'll start putting on the metal components. And Mr. Kramer's been keeping in real close contact with Deborah, with CAMA, to make sure that she's aware of what we're doing. And we had a very tight timeline to get that in and established. So everything's going according to plan, and everything's looking very, very good now. Any questions on the wastewater treatment plant?
No, sir.
Okay. Wastewater collections. Couple of things on the wastewater collections. There's 2 personnel that we've actually asked to be employed this year. One is utility worker and one is a lift station well operator. Over the last few years, we've had 2 people that's run wells, 2 people that's run wastewater lift stations, and we went through a process of cross-training and getting people certified. And in the organizational chart, we really need to have a supervisor. So we basically talked to the manager. We've promoted Chris Nichols to the lift station well supervisor, where he has a team of a total of 5 people is what we're asking for, and we've got 4 right now. But that way we can, the state requires us to make daily inspections and operations at all of our wells and all of our lift stations. So we've got people cross-trained to handle that, and that's one of the reasons we're asking for that 1 additional people as a lift station operator, well operator. The utility worker, we really don't have a full crew of people to be able to handle everything that we're doing right now with all the sewer work and the water taps, and we're contracting a lot of stuff out. I'm working with Mark Myers. We feel very comfortable adding this other person, $49,352. We can probably eliminate $100,000 to $150,000 worth of contract work. So I think that'd be a good investment to have a person here readily available and be able to enhance that team versus paying everything out to a contractor to do some of the different components we're doing in different depths. One of the issues we're having, and this is down in the Pinfish area, part of the old Wilmington-Hamby Beach and part of the stuff on CBA North, is the depth of the sewer lines. We really don't have any component that's deep enough to dig these sewer lines safely. Couple things we're asking for this year with the mini excavator and the dump truck is to be able to pull that and be able to physically dig down and do these repairs. As I go into the highlights, again, I'm asking for a dump truck for this division. I'm also asking for a Cat mini excavator for $55,000. The camera head, we've got a very detailed camera video operation that we do all the infrastructure evaluations with. And one of the things that the division is also doing, in years past, when we got ready, for example, to go pave a road, we just went and paved it. What we're doing now is going in and doing a thorough evaluation of all of the infrastructure before we pave the road, kind of like we've done when we've done Lewis and St. Joseph and all. And as we find these problems, we're repairing them. So when we pave the road, we hope it's going to be a long time repair, and we can pave it and we don't have to go back and dig it up 6 months later to fix something that we overlooked. So we've got a process in place right now, and During this last event, matter of fact, we've lost a camera head. And the camera head's basically $20,000 for that. And we had to sit around about 6 weeks and could not utilize that, and it held up a couple of projects. So we'd like to have enough money to buy a camera head replacement. There's 2 replacement trucks on the list that we would sell the existing trucks and replace trucks with. And then we have a submersible pump replacement. And then the MERT trailer I talked to you guys about earlier, and that's a mobile emergency response trailer. And it's got the cones, the barriers, the lights, pretty much everything on one item. And this last year, we actually kind of put one together, but didn't have a third unit. But there was multiple times when the fire department asked for assistance. There was times when the police department asked for assistance, and working with Alan. And matter of fact, part of the Dipper 3, the emergency management team that I'm on as the director of the public utilities, the MERT trailers were asked for in detail through Dipper 3. Most everybody has 2 MERT trailers as a team to be able to handle significant events, whether it's a car accident, fire, whatever. And the MERTs, I feel like, are very, very valuable to us. It's something that I absolutely got to have, maybe not. But it's something I think will be beneficial that Alan's asked me for, and the fire department and the police department's asked me for. Yes, it is. So those are the components that we're asking for this year, and the overall budget for the wastewater collections is a 3% decrease from last year.
And Gil, you mentioned the Dipper 3 grants. We've
Yes, sir.
applied for the grants to get reimbursement for those MERT trailers.
We actually, when I done the presentation to the state, they actually awarded, so I could have 1 MERT trailer this year. Whenever the budget comes in, it should be happening sometime between August and September. And it's kind of like the 2 wastewater treatment plant pumps that we got through the MERT system, through the Dipper system a couple years ago, and also the verbal message board that you see around town used for everything. Those basically didn't cost us a penny. The state emergency management system, I done a presentation to them, presented the validation of it, and got funded for those items. We'll hopefully this fall have funding for 1 MERT trailer. But when I done the presentation to the Dipper 3, I guess I done such a good job that now every county wants 2 of them. So they kind of put me on rotation. So they are going to get me 1 this year, but they're also going to give the other one to Whiteville, the town of Whiteville. And then they're going to start doing everything in the rotation for Dipper 3. Then hopefully the time the cycle gets back around in a few years, maybe we'll get a second. But, I really feel like if we bought the second one, it would add, and we'd have a full set, and we'd be able to pretty much address any kind of emergency that we may have. And again, it's out of the utility fund, but it wasn't necessarily being used all the time in the utility arena. But it was something that I think would definitely enhance and increase public health and safety, because when we had a couple of the recent fires, it was a struggle to try to get everything to Allen as quick as he wanted to safeguard his people and the fire trucks and even the police activities. So I've talked to Chris and I've talked to Alan. Like I said, they total supportive of it. Again, I'm asking for it in my budget, and I'd like to have approval for it.
Do we currently have a dump truck now?
Sir,
Do we currently have a dump truck now?
we currently do have 1 dump truck now.
How far into its life cycle is it?
Say again?
How far into its life cycle is it?
We bought a used dump truck, and it's got good life cycle. We actually use multiple dump trucks every day. Several times in the last year, when the knuckle boom went down, and we done all debris pickup around the yards, especially in spring and fall, or we got a storm. That's one of our shortages. We really don't have enough dump trucks. Sometimes a dump truck sits idle, but most of the time that dump truck runs on a daily basis. And David, for example, he pretty much uses 1 to 2 dump trucks every single day.
Okay.
Scott uses one in stormwater basically every single day. Martin uses one to haul rock and gravel every day, back and forth for utility repairs. And a lot of times we have to kind of shift and wait, and so we really need 1 more dump truck if I can get one, so I can make sure we can enhance the operation.
We-
Replacing our single axle, which is
Yeah, that's my question, is that if we're replacing something, that way we're not looking for more storage on where we store everything.
For the most part, what you'll see is we don't buy a whole lot of new equipment. We have been replacing existing equipment with different types of
Okay.
equipment. So the single axle truck that Mark's talking about has gone its lifespan, but if we replace that with a dump truck, then we're facilitating the need that we have for a dump truck plus the truck use that we get out of it as it is for a truck. So majority of everything is done as a replacement, and I believe in the CIP information that I sent you, it lists out replacement of, number 431 or something. That's how you can indicate whether we are replacing a specific piece of equipment. When we do that and we replace a specific piece of equipment, we only budget a nominal amount of revenue that we get back.
Okay.
So for instance, we may replace, let's just say, 10 pieces of equipment this year. I'm only budgeting $3,000 worth of revenue coming back in. But recently, we've been getting amazing numbers out of our equipment for resale.
Okay.
So that is an extra benefit that we either use during the year to offset expenses or goes into fund balance.
Typically, Gil, what do we use in a dump truck? I mean, just help us understand what you use a dump truck for. I mean, I understand what a dump truck does, don't get me wrong, I'm just asking you.
When I got a water leak, a sewer leak, and we have to first cut the asphalt, dig out the stone, we load the asphalt and stone onto it, we go dump that. We get new gravel, new dirt, whatever have to have the backfill, we haul material back and forth with it. We do it to maintain some of the streets. It just, everyday use of stuff we use dump trucks for.
Yard debris,
Like I said, David, it's constantly moving, I mean, it's,
household removal.
All right.
So that's a large dump truck. I mean, what is the tonnage in that?
say again, sir?
Yeah, that's a large, for $80,000, that's a large dump truck.
Single axle, right?
It's not a huge dump truck. Dump truck can run anywhere from $75,000 to $200,000 or $300,000.
Yeah, I'm looking them up online.
I'm in.
So, like, for instance, whenever your guys, you said there would be some downtime with it. I see them a lot of times going around with 2 pickup trucks, picking up stuff like mattresses, and you would use the dump truck instead?
We tried to use that, and last year we had, I think, 5 cases of bed bugs, and we try to not handle the mattresses. We'd rather pick them up with a knuckle boom or backhoe, put them on a device such as a dump truck, and so we can go to the disposal site and we dump it, and it's pretty much no hands-on. We worked with HR pretty strictly last year because some of the employees get bed bugs off of these mattresses, it's actually shocked me. Then they carry them home. Then we have to do treatment of not only the person but their families. It gets to be expensive, and it's not a very.
What do you mean they
operation.
carried them home?
Ma'am?
But who carried them home?
A couple of employees.
Well, hey, that's on them.
No.
I mean,
I'm talking
No, no.
about when
Right.
they touch the mattresses, they got the bed bugs on them.
Absolutely, yeah. hmm And you
Yeah.
can't,
So
resell
that's the kind of
mattresses
stuff we
in
do
North
not
Carolina.
want, and,
Why do you need a backhoe, though, to pick
Ma'am?
that? You send a backhoe to pick that stuff
a
up?
lot of times I'll use the backhoe with a clam bucket to pick it up and set it on the dump truck and haul it and dump it.
Oh, okay, I just didn't know you did that. I
I
mean,
don't like personnel grabbing stuff like that. I mean, I've been.
well, you don't know that, that sounds like a lot of equipment just to pick up some mattresses and some
Well, it
furniture.
is, but we tried to schedule it. Like I say, if we can do it with a knuckle boom, we just pick it up with a knuckle boom, load it, and go haul it. But that's one of those where we have mattresses kind of on a separate route. But working with HR, we're trying to eliminate the exposure of potential, stuff.
I mean, just because they're outside doesn't mean they have anything on.
No. That's a good point. But some of the places they're coming out of, I don't think you want to go stay. Anyway.
Do you do that once a quarter? I forgot, how is
No,
that?
it's actually, they pretty much call for those.
And you charge them based on what you pick up? Okay.
Any other questions on wastewater collections? Next. Water distribution. Still basically got the staff, we actually want to convert raw water well number 7, and we want to convert it to a distribution well. Estimate cost on that is about $50,000. A couple years ago, we didn't have any SCADA at the wells, and now we're trying to get the SCADA systems installed at all the wells so we can monitor them, we can turn them on remotely if we need to, we can know whether we got a failure. We've done this a couple of times when we had significant fires where we have to go back and cut the wells on to repurpose the system. Like I told you, the council meets, especially during busy months, in the summertime, which we actually generate more water than what we have capacity to handle. So that's what we've done on the SCADA system. And then well house work at McDonald Park, about $9,000. The well house at McDonald Park is the one that actually had a 1947 pump and components thereof actually still left in the well housing and the well casing itself. That well was approximately 200 feet deep when we started to pull everything out and do our well inspection this year with the well upgrades. The current pump was about a 2-inch pump. It was 85 foot deep, and it had a hole about 3 foot above the coupler. So basically, we was getting about 12 gallons a minute out of that well, which was nearing the point of totally just abandoning the well. By doing the well upgrade and the information I sent you guys yesterday, we was able to extract all the components that was left in the well years past. It's an open well. It actually goes through a limestone configuration. And we videoed that, got all the components out, and right now, we're actually getting about 150 gallons a minute out of that well, which adds a lot of volume of water to our distribution system. And we need to rework the old well house that's there. So, and we've done most of the work on those well houses ourselves, so we've saved a significant amount of dollars. So I'm asking for $9,000 for that. Overall budget for the water distribution division is a 40% decrease from last year. Any
That's a
questions?
significant amount.
Yes, sir.
From 1.4.
Well, Mr. Kramer told you several years ago, we'd asked for several things in the water and also the pump station area because the stuff had been left in such bad maintenance and repair for years and years and years.
Yeah.
And when we changed this stuff out, we've had a significant reduction in electrical cost. We've had less issues with pipe failures, spills, cable failures. And again, if we maintain these stations like we should be maintaining them, which Chris has been doing an outstanding job on, I think we're going to be able to stabilize these numbers. We won't probably see a 4% decrease next year, but I think you're going to see something that's very, digestible and maintainable.
Right. Yeah, I'm sure that the new pump is much more efficient than the 1947 model.
Well, what was amazing is, and Chris can go into this in detail, but we actually had one of the local engineering companies come in that specializes in wells.
Yeah.
And we found that some of the pumps didn't have the right size power going to it. They didn't have the right size starters. The pumps weren't doing efficiencies, piping issues, back checks. Just it was a whole list of items, and so we found those, we addressed them and fixed them, and now we're seeing much more efficient operation in every single well.
Well, from 12 to 150 gallons a minute, that is quite a bit of difference.
Well, we actually have just finished the 6th well out of the 14 or 13. 5 of the 6 is finished,
Yeah.
and just like we sent you that copy of that report yesterday that Chris
Right.
actually wrote.
That's service.
Appreciate that.
Thank you, Devin. That's great, Bill. Phenomenal.
All right.
Thanks.
Well, I couldn't do it without y'all's support. So, fleet maintenance. This utility fleet maintenance, again, I looked at everything we had last year. We've added stuff, we've changed some stuff around, and it's not much of a decrease, but it's not an increase. So the goal was try to keep everything, as low as possible and be efficient as possible, and I think we've done a good job of that with vehicles, equipment, tires, gas, fuel, and everything on that. And that was one, years ago, for some of you that just kind of joined the council, years ago, we actually had 2 employees that were mechanics. And they looked after the fleet. Pretty much, that's one of the additional responsibilities that got passed on to me. And Rebecca helps me, and Alicia helps me. So we manage the fleet, not only the utility fleet, but the general fleet. So I coordinate with the fire department, police department, everybody else, and Mr. Cram, pretty much, if they need something, they need to come ask me for it, so I can look at the budget, make sure it's not wild spending. And we use 3 or 4 different local suppliers to try to maintain vehicles, but sometimes we have to go to specials, like Triple T, some out of state, sometimes Monroe, Charlotte, different locations, and we have multiple contacts, so we just maintain it to the best of our ability and continue to move on.
Sounds good.
Any questions on utility maintenance?
Nope.
Okay. Stormwater. There's 2 major components that we've asked for this year to be replaced on this. And basically, we got a replacement gator, and then we got the Greenville pump station generator. Last year, the council said, we got pump stations, there's no backup for power failures. The one at Texas, where we had a significant flood issue, you guys told me they wanted that addressed. We got it addressed, we pooled money, and the generator at Texas should be in place by this week. So going into, what would you say would be the forecasted hurricane season, we've got that generator in place at Texas, so we won't have a failure there. We've also got a bypass hooked up on the discharge pipe, so if we did have a failure, we could put one of those pumps that we got through the dipper system that belongs to, technically us, and we have means for it to run. So at Greenville, which actually takes the pump station and pulls that to keep it from going to the lake and pumps it to the stormwater pond, there's no backup power there. If overhead power goes out, that station is out. And then, we've also had one of those pumps we utilize them to pick the water up out of the ditch and pump it back to the headworks of that, so we try to keep that water from going to the lake. So there's several systems that we've put in the last couple of years that's been very significant and beneficial. And by our contract and lease agreements with Matsu, one of our responsibilities is maintain Henniker's Ditch, basically from where the tank is on Alabama all the way to the Mike Chapel Park. We've done that somewhat, but it's overgrown. It's got places where it's got wash-in on it. We've had several quotes and everything. And, of course, our people's going to be doing a lot of the work with it, but we're asking for a budget of $90,000 to help us maintain that ditch this upcoming year, and I think that's the first time that's been asked for in a long, long, long time. But to be, again, to be good stewards of the environment and do our part that we're supposed to with Matsu, I'm asking for that money to maintain that ditch.
Well,
Bill, if we do that, sorry, Tom.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Well, and that's important. We've got 2 pumps sending a lot of water that way.
You
We
got
don't
more than 2
maintain the
pumps.
ditch, we got a problem.
You got more than 2 pumps.
Yeah, more than 2 pumps, yeah. But just from the lake, we have 2,
Yes.
It's defensible.
And if we have,
very much.
stop, hey, I trademark that, man. If we do that, do we have, as part from Michael too, to what extent can we modify the dimensions of the ditch? Deeper, wider, anticipating we're gonna need that tied to the, drain the lake.
For the most part,
It touches a lot of what we're doing infrastructure-wise.
right, for the most part, there's very little that we can do to change the structural components of that ditch. Honestly, it is looked at more as a stream. It actually shows up on USGS as a stream, which means if we were to do any rehab of the banks anything more than maintenance, we would have to get 401 and 404 core permits and things like that to be able to allow us to do that work. Is it possible? Yes, you can, but it would be quite expensive and extensive to do that. At the present time, at the present time, we don't see that it's necessary. If it's maintained well and you keep the vegetation out of there, we should have sufficient flow to go through that structure.
And Sunny Point has asked us to keep it up to a certain extent.
As part of our license or our lease agreement with Matsu for Hinniker's Ditch, we're required to do the maintenance on it, and they'll come by and do inspections periodically every couple of years on that ditch. Most recently, we've been down there to look at various components of it, and it hasn't been maintained extremely well in the past.
We haven't had a volume problem in Henniger's Ditch. It hasn't been an issue of too much water flowing through.
No, we haven't had an overtopping.
Right, right. It's a big ditch.
But we got hit with Hurricane Matthew, and it blew the dam out at the stormwater pond down on the end of Alabama. And pretty much all that sand and everything went in the Henniker Ditch. That time it actually pretty much blocked the ditch up. When we rebuilt the bank, of course, you know, the Matsu people come over and I talked to them, and I had some Corps people there. They told me as long as I maintained it, got the debris out, got it back to what was the pre-existing, you know, flow levels and stuff like that, that was maintenance. And over the years, we've had some places where, you know, big storms, heavy storms come, and it washes out a place in that ditch. That's a relatively deep ditch. One side has got as much vegetation as the other side has. But basically, I talked, the west side has overgrown, the trees get into it. We mow and maintain the east side relatively well, but we don't do anything in the ditch. And actually, I think Scott got up with a guy that's got a grind on the excavator about grinding the vegetation off so we don't disturb the root mat. And then we actually remove that out of the ditch.
But we're not
to keep
dipping the bottom of the ditch out on a...
We have, some places we have to if we got a washout going in and it's changed elevation, but overall, no. And that's
We haven't
something.
done any kind of restoring it to its original elevation.
We've got some places where we had to dig it out to get it back to its.
I mean, to Joe's question, we are allowed to maintain a ditch to its historical depth. So
Yes.
If it starts to get silt on the bottom, you're allowed to dip that out anytime you want.
And basically, what Gil's saying is, in the areas where we've seen need, we've done that, but we haven't completely reprofiled the entire ditch or gone and whole hog changed out the profile of the ditch on the bottom. It's just been sporadic areas where we do have washouts and problems that pop up.
I think when we begin work on this, it makes sense that we tie that, bringing maybe Mike over from Sunny Point, and then have the discussion while he's here on well 15H, which you'd like to do something with. Show a good faith on this, and maybe we can get something out of it.
I definitely think that we would call Mike and have them come over to see what we're doing.
Do we have permission to maintain that as needed, or are you having to call them?
No, we have permission to maintain it as needed, but out of courtesy, we always call them or send them an email and say, hey, we're going to be doing work in this area.
How often do they come over?
Depends.
Should we set up a quarterly or a biannual meeting, or is that bad?
No, they're over here on a daily basis with their security forces, and if they see anything different, they'll announce it. So we typically try and talk to them on a regular basis about projects that are going on. But no, it's not something where we typically have a standing meeting.
And I also think Mike Fuller lives in Kerr Beach, and he drives through here frequently, and sometimes it's kind of like unexpected, like he's got 30 minutes, or he wants to leave early one day, and he happens to, I'm going to go check on Carolina Beach. So, you know, it's kind of like we got eyes on us 24/7, and we're just kind of being prepared. And again, since it's written in the contract, it says you shall maintain this. I don't want to get any kind of a bad blood or anything started where we're not maintaining it to the best of our ability, but I can't maintain without funds. So that's what I'm asking for. Any questions on stormwater?
Gil, did you want to touch on the mower and sweeper replacement that is in the utility fund debt service that will actually be used in stormwater?
This year's stormwater budget, we actually had three major components that was asked for. One was a new vector, one was a replacement to the sweeper that we have, and one was a mower so we can maintain our ditches and these outfalls. Talking to Mr. Kramer, it was recommended that the vector be put in next year's budget, and we maintained the one budget, the vector we got this year, for another year's utilization. We've just had some upfit done to it. It's going to push it, but I think we can do that and save an additional $400,000 this year and put into next year's budget. But just kind of up front, you're going to be seeing a new vac replacement come for stormwater in next year's budget. Currently, the sweeper we have is approximately 11 years old that you see sweep the streets every day. It's utilized not only to get the sand and debris up to stop stuff from coming into the stormwater, and it's kind of funny that people say, well, why is a sweeper in stormwater? On a daily basis, that thing takes cigarette butts, debris, and all the stuff that's on the streets and prevents it from going into the stormwater system, and which is discharged into the bays and whatever else. Also, after any time we got a major event like a Christmas parade, anything like that, that sweeper is used to clean streets, which saves us literally hundreds of man-hours of people. And normally we can get that whole operation done in about 2 to 3 hours after an event, and it looks like it never happened. You know, whether it's Christmas candy and all the poo-paws and after the fireworks and stuff like that. So that sweeper has been critical for us to maintain the streets, appearance-wise and also environmental-wise for years. That sweeper has gotten to the point that the cost of maintenance exceeds pretty much its value. So we're asking for replacement on that sweeper. Again, we've had an old tractor with a side mower on it and I don't know how many years it is old. I could probably go back and check, but I know it's over 15 years old. So we're asking for a new component just so we can maintain our ditches much better than we currently are. So those are the items that we put in the utility fund, was those two. Any questions on the stormwater slide? All right, the last one I got for you is utility fund total.
Take it down.
Again, with the personnel and everything we've asked for, the overall budget is still 7% less than it was last year.
It's awesome.
Yeah, I like that one.
So we're trying to do everything that the council's asked us to do. We constantly get new challenges, whether it's additional stuff on Freeman Park, additional stuff at the beach accesses, around the lake, whatever. And our people have been very happy to get those additional items accomplished. And as you know, from last year to this year, there are several things been added to our request list that we may not have specifically budgeted, but we've been able to juggle our money and do stuff effectively to be able to maintain and get everything we needed and still stay within our projected budget. And that's the conclusion of my presentation.
So
Any
Gil,
questions?
you're adding 2 employees and still decreasing your budget by 7%.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And tell me again where those 2 employees are being added.
One of them would go actually to the well pump station division under Chris Nichols
Right.
to make out a total of 5, a team of 5.
Okay.
And then the other one would be a utility worker that goes under Mark and Chris Hare so we can improve our construction team.
Okay. And then Gil, one of the things we've been trying to get a handle on is your crystal ball. We're doing the major infrastructure projects in the older part of town. We did a bunch of stuff on some stormwater down around the central business district. I know you guys have been looking on the north end a little bit. We started moving forward on a water and sewer. Do you see any other things coming up that we haven't started to talk about? I mean, we've addressed the water treatment. We've addressed a tank. Are there areas of town that you think, from an operations or utilities, that we're going to need to start putting on that 2, 3, 4, 5-year horizon?
One of the things that Scott and his team's been really good at is the stormwater pipes. In the last couple of years, again, where he's been able to clean them and video them and evaluate them, we've already identified 2 or 3 places that we've got failing or failed stormwater pipes. Some of those we can replace. Some of them we're going to have contractors to replace. again, there's not a slide here today for power bill, because I know Mr. Kramer's going to address stuff on power bill. But again, as we start looking at areas to pave, we're going back and look at the infrastructure components to make sure where we got to replace a water line, sewer line, or storm drain. So I do not want to pave it, tear it up the next week, and, we got to be proactive on that. So when we invest our money, we get the most longevity out of what we invest. I'm seeing some issues on stormwater. I'm seeing some concerns on water. Again, in the next year, I mean, I'd really wished it was in this year's budget, but it's not. But, I wish this water tank was being built, and I told you guys, last year we had 28 days to where we exceeded our capacity on water. Basically, when you don't have a 2 million gallon storage capacity and you sell 2.3 million gallons through the meters that day, you got some that's flushing or whatever. So, again, you have to run wells longer. And that's one of the reasons that we asked for the well rehabilitation project last year. And if we got any funds left on that, we're going to ask that that be carried over so we can use it. There's a lot of stuff that I see out here in what you call my magic ball.
Yeah.
But it just, as you look around town and we look at these developments and the growth, we've done some major accomplishments in the last 2 years. All the infrastructure work around the boardwalk and all the stuff we're doing at the boardwalk was just almost unheard of, but we took that task on and we accomplished it. We're doing the infrastructure work, and according to Greg, who's from SEPI, and Brian Cox from his engineering firm, Engineered Services out of Garner, the paperwork went out yesterday to the state, and Greg told me that they looking to hopefully advertise that North End project, which is like Florida, Delaware, that entire area, sometime this fall. So we could possibly be starting construction on it as early as January. The Phase C can almost fall in that same footprint, but it's kind of like 6 months behind it. But it's a little bit smaller area, and it probably be less impactful than what the North End's going to be.
Okay.
We got to
Question
figure
for
out where you're going to get the funding to do those two major projects. But those two projects, all that is inclusive of water, sewer, and stormwater. And we got streets. So there's a lot of different stuff that's all coming down the pike in the next year that's going to be infrastructure related.
Okay.
So my question would be is, next year when we get together for this workshop, how hard do we need to push for this 3 million gallon tank that we keep talking about?
If you wait to then to get started, you're going to be way too late.
So then we need to be speaking about it right now. If we have the property, we need to, but that's nowhere labeled in here.
Well, like I said, Mr. Kramer has been doing a really fantastic job trying to get that land obtained. That's one of the commodities, and that's one of the things at Carolina Beach that, for whatever reason, land down here is a premium, and we don't have a whole lot of spare footprints.
To give you an idea of specifically on that project, initially when we went and looked at doing a revenue bond, it was inclusive of all 5 of the phases of water, sewer, stormwater, and road repairs. It included a water treatment plant. It included the 3 million gallon tank and so forth. At the time, the cost of that was in the $45 million range. We did not feel like we could bite off that much at one time. So we backed off of that and scaled things out a little bit. So we did our first revenue bond issuance and said we will have increases for the next 5 years to cover the debt payment on those. Once that 5 years comes up, that's when we'll start funding revenue debt for the next phase of the projects, which was water tank and the water plant and things like that. So we scaled that out, and I still have that same information that I can show you. What we've added in is some different things dealing with how do we pay for Phase C and continue that route. which we've gotten loans from the state on, and the north end. So I have basically a scale, and I'll end up sending that to you, that shows the capital improvement plan for all of our improvements. A lot of it is going to be in the utility area, but it will also show you where we're doing improvements, maybe in the streets area, or where we're doing improvements in signs or signals and things of that nature for the general fund. So yes, the idea is that we're slowly making headway, but unless we want to significantly increase the fees to cover additional debt, that's where we run into a time crunch on how we handle projects.
So we basically said we had 45, at one level, we identified about $45 million worth of work. We scaled that back and did about a $30 million bond. So we dropped some items out of that 45, so we just can't afford them today.
Right.
Since then, we've added stuff into that 30 million, and we've shifted some of those priorities within that 30 million, and we're gonna spend some of that money in a different direction than what we originally thought, like the north end, or we've done a few other things. We've had some cost overruns. We've changed it up just a little bit. And we stopped at 30, if I remember, Michael, because we felt like there was a threshold that we just couldn't keep adding to the utility costs every year. And Michael did a utility study and said, compared to other places in the country, here's where our rate is, here's where we could be, and that gap is what we got to about $30 million with an annual increase, and we fought pretty hard with staff about keeping that as low as possible. And that's why the question is, when debt's paid off, we don't incur more debt because we've got the bonds going up, so there's that teeter-totter there that increases. But at some point, Jodianne, we still have a backlog of projects that we need to address. And there's only a couple of ways to do that. Either wait or bond it, and if we bond it, it typically is a utility fund. The town, as you know, gets most of its revenue from two sources. Either everything's thrown into the utility and it pays for itself, or it's a general fund, and the general fund typically doesn't pay for utility work.
Sure.
So we either raise property tax or we raise utility rates is the only way to substantially, or parking rates, which we can get to here in a little bit.
And the difficult part about that dynamic is what you charge to what area. Like Steve said, we could do improvements for the roads in the general fund, and that would go along with our utility corrections, water, sewer, stormwater. Well, that just means that you're shifting the burden to a property tax rate instead of a utility fee. So it all depends on where you put it. And for most recently, what we've been doing is, if we tear it up for a utility project, which is everything we do all at one time, the road gets put back on there. So it does, I don't want to say it overinflates the
Let's call it overburden. Let's call it overburden.
It burdens that utility.
Right, so,
that.
well, I had some general questions. Thank you for the presentation.
Well, one thing that I want to make a comment on, when the original presentation that we had for area A, B, C, and D, and E for infrastructure rehabilitation, which was some of the older sections of town, not including the north end, okay? That evaluation was done around 2000, and it basically included water mains and sewer mains. It did not include water services. It did not include sewer services. It did not include storm drain work. It did not include much roadway work. So one of the concepts that the council kind of, directed me and Mr. Kramer to make sure happened is, if we go in and tear a road up, we want to make sure that we replace the sewer service, the water service. If we got to do work on the sidewalks or streets, inconvenience the people one time, do it and do it right, and then move on, and hopefully you ain't got to go back for the infrastructure work for the next 50 years, okay? That wasn't the concept of the previous councils and other management people.
When we first came up with that $30 million estimate, it did not include all that stuff.
That's
for all those
exactly right.
areas. So
That's
that
what-
30
that's what I'm
million is
telling you.
not
So-
gonna get A, B, C, D, and E done.
No, I think the original was in the 60 million to get everything done.
We did several iterations of trimming things back.
So,
Yeah.
okay.
So are there other questions specifically for Gil? Because the next segment, I did have some things that I wanted to
Yeah,
talk to
just
y'all
a
about.
quick question about because I know you presented this to the operations committee about the water tank and how fast you could put one up. I think it was in the 6 months range. Is
Yes,
that
sir.
correct? Yeah.
We've actually had, on the water tank, we've had two different manufacturers come and make a presentation, me and Mr. Kramer and our staff, actually in the conference room, of how they could do a pre-stressed on-site tank,
Right.
do the site preparation and get the tank up and get everything finished on a tank in about a 6-month time frame. You know, again, as long as it's a new tank and then I'm doing the piping, it doesn't create an issue. If we were to put it somewhere where we had an existing tank and you got demolition of tank and rebuild, it's a real
Right,
tight.
right.
Because
If we're talking about that
yeah,
property.
a really, you know, and the thing about it is, and Ed and Mr. Kramer and I went out and looked at a couple of different water treatment facilities down in Turrell County. And there's systems out here that we could have, and matter of fact, in the water sewer meeting last week, Kerr Beach would like us to do another aquifer study, a joint study, because the town of Carolina Beach done one several years ago, that showed what the actual aquifers look like that Carolina Beach and Kerr Beach are both pulling from. We got one well right now that we got a slight amount of salinity that comes in,
Yeah.
but it's not significant at this time. It's well below the state levels. But as we continue to pull water out and not conserve water, the aquifers are going to continue to reduce in size. So, there's some stuff we need to maybe be looking at for water conservation to limit, potable water is going to be a commodity. That's one thing we cannot live without is water.
Right.
You can do temporary without electricity, you can do temporary without sewer, but, you pretty much can't survive without water. So we got a good stable source. We just got to protect that source and utilize it to the best of ability. And again, when we looked at the water treatment facility by doing a reverse osmosis membrane filtration system, we could put that system in and it will desalinate the water. So basically that water that's got any salinity on it will be totally eliminated. Do we have to have reverse osmosis down everything? No, we don't. But if we put the system in, it needs to be designed so it can handle that. So as we continue to add water, 20 years from now, whatever, and we get more salinity, we need to still be able to provide that water to the residents of Carolina Beach.
Right.
So I'm looking at long-term rather than short-term.
And that's smart.
Thank you, Gil.
Thanks, Gil.
Thank you.
One of the things that I wanted to sort of end this discussion today with was sort of what we got into at the beginning, which was, are there certain questions that I am sure I don't have the answers for right this very minute, but that you would like information on at the next meeting? We've talked a little bit about breakout for Freeman Park, structures for the beach access, the porta potty use for special events, debt service calculations all in one place.
We just got those from Debbie. She just handed us those debt service
Yeah, we got that.
breakouts.
Capital plan. Yeah, the debt service sheets, we have those. So the question I have is, what other types of upcoming issues other than, individual department presentations do you want to hear about or talk about in the next couple of meetings?
I specifically like Steve's magic ball. Where does the town see itself in 5 years, and pretty much every aspect that we could think of per department that we're slowly trying to gauge and build up for versus just annually. I love all this, but at the same time, I kind of like the idea of, okay, where we see ourselves now, what's that longevity of where we're going to be in the next 5-7 years, whether it's the tank.
Can I ask you a couple of questions on that to clarify? For most of the administrative departments, the annual budget doesn't really change. Our maintenance and operations cost for the administrative wing of the organization is pretty static. So that's really not the type of
capital
5-10-year
outlay.
planning you're talking about. You're looking at capital type
Yep.
stuff, 5 to 10 years. Yes, and I have that down to try and provide you what the capital plan looks like in the 5-10 years. That's also part of our budget book. And we do that every year, so you have that in the budget book and you can see that general plan of capital improvements.
That needs to include the Valley Drive or not?
Well, that's
and
the crystal
Joe Dan-
ball question. What are the different options that we would be looking at that could be out there? I mean, you should have a wish list that said, if we had unlimited, this is all the things we need to do, and then we can look at it and say, well, we can only prioritize and do so much.
Well, currently, like the wastewater treatment plant, we've got a couple of special engineers that's looking at stuff to see how we can improve operation of wastewater plant and then what we're gonna need. I don't have that report right now, but in the next 6 months, I can provide that to you.
Okay.
We're also doing stuff on water system studies, and we're doing wells. We're doing stuff here in the last 18 months that's only done in probably 40 years. We're actually be able to trigger and evaluate stuff, so we can really truly project where we need to be in 5 years.
Well,
We're right now
Well,
in.
just my only comment to Joe Dan is staff can have a crystal ball all they, I mean, forever, but this council changes every 2 years. And the direction of council is what changes their crystal ball. I mean, a lot of the stuff Gil's doing right now would not have happened if it had not been for the previous council that started that project.
But
So,
what
I mean, I'm sure they got lots of things they'd love to do.
Originally, my thought was looking at things like, the fire chief came in and said he's got some equipment in the next 5 years. He's going to need to start thinking about replacing it. The police chief says, look, I've got a program I want to implement and it's going to obligate for the next 3 to 5. And Gil's saying, long-term, I've got a water storage issue. In the next 10 years, we're going to have to do some substantial upgrades to the sewer treatment. Just put out there so we can start looking at some of those.
And I heard the
ideas.
police chief say he needed more space. So I know what that means to me. In the back of my mind says he needs a additional building,
Now,
additional
one
area.
thing to keep in mind with some of these things, if we haven't done the engineering and we haven't done any sort of evaluation on exactly what's needed. You mentioned the police department wanting space. Yes, we have in the budget $8,000 to do a little space plan this year, or in this next
Right.
year's budget, so that we'll be able to give you that down the road. Now, I could put that on the list, but I'm going to have to take a dart and throw it at the board and say, it's a $500,000 project.
No, I'm not looking for a dollar
Right.
amount as much, Michael, as I am
Idea.
an idea, a list, an
Certainly.
issue list that's coming up. I can't expect Gil to tell me in 10 years it's going to cost 20 million to do the sewer treatment, but I can expect him to say, on our current growth trajectory, within
Right.
X number of years, you're going to need to be in a position to do something on the sewer treatment plant. And
it
within
could
X
be
number
in
of
this
years,
range.
the police chief says, I'm going to have a space issue. Now, we may tell the police chief that's too bad, start doubling up, but we just need to know what those issues are. Personally, I'm not looking for a dollar amount. I think that's unrealistic. But I am
Do
looking
you mean a
for
ballpark
roadmap.
number or not?
Well, I don't know if
I
it's
know a range.
possible. but-
I,
Pretty good.
I would, typically what I would do is I would give you a educated guess. Meaning I would talk to contractors and say, if I need to build a X size building, how much you think it'll cost? And get that and put that out there. But the one thing you have to realize is that those numbers can change as we get more realistic projections and things like that.
But if-
As long as you're comfortable with that, sure, we can put that stuff together and have it prepared for you. And that's what I was really talking about in that 5-year capital plan.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think we should, as a council, ask staff to do that every couple of years, do a 5 to 10 year capital plan. Just like we had the MPO in here the other day, they're doing a 2045 long-range vision for the region for transportation. Carolina Beach ought to understand, I mean, we've got some issues that are coming that we're going to need to address, one way or the other.
And although the information has been in the budget books for years on this 5 and 10 year capital, I think what the town has done is downplay those projections because it was always about this year's budget or next year's budget. So
became the
we've gone and caught up to ourselves now, and we're sort of in a transition time frame where we're spending more resources on trying to figure out exactly what we need and how we need to do it over the next several years. And then you'll see that change happen where you'll be looking to the future for projects and improvements.
So, Michael, you asked for some things that we'd like at the next meeting.
Yes, sir.
I need to understand and double check what our current property valuation is for the townwide. You know, in other words, are we at 1.1 billion in property value that we're going to assess, or is it 800 million, or where are we at? We've had a lot of new properties come online to go from lots to houses.
Okay.
And therefore, I would like to equate what each 1 point on the property tax equals, right?
For dollar value.
Yeah, so in the past, we've said every point up or down is about $275,000, either a plus or a minus to the budget, just to kind of understand when we have that conversation. I need that breakout again on what our parking revenue is.
What kind of breakout are you talking about?
Either gross revenue or gross with some expense. What are we putting in the kitty from parking?
Or net.
Okay, so what you want to know is what we're spending in parking compared to what we bring in, and what the difference is, and where does that difference go?
For example, I was looking at, and because I've been curious, someone asked me the other day, what's our property tax rate compared to Curie Beach or Wrightsville Beach? Curie Beach is currently at 28. We're at 22, 23. They're about to go up 4.5. They're going to crest 30-some, 32. Wrightsville is at 12.5 points. They're 10 points less than we are. So when I look at their budget, they bring in $2.6 million in parking, and they spend $500 to get it. So they net to their coffers $2 million. So we've had quite a boisterous response to our
Are we not
request to
doing
do
it
an RFP for a parking deck. There's only so many ways we can do issues in town. One of those is, do we take a Wrightsville approach and go to $2 an hour, or $2.50 an hour, or $3 an hour for parking and generate a boatload of money on parking? Or do we continue to be more affordable? I'm just throwing that on. I have no preconceived notion, but I'd like to understand our parking. Wrightsville gets $1 million in sales tax. Now, their property tax is 12, ours is 22. Do we get $1 million in sales tax?
At least, just
Okay,
depending
I'm
on.
just trying to remember. I haven't
Depending
gone back
on
through-
which property I'm sorry,
Sales
which
tax.
sales tax it is, because there's one that's a penny, one that's a half penny, and so on. So you cobble those all together. Yes, my guess is that it's
So,
over $1 million.
It sounds like to me that Steve is narrowing in on our income. Where's our money coming from?
Well,
Is that
yeah,
what
yeah,
I
I
hear you
mean,
saying?
yes, 'cause
We know where it's spent. We want to know what we're
Historically,
bringing
we have
in
not,
and where it comes from.
We have not historically, at least
And
since
where are their options?
I've been on council, we haven't historically browbeat staff to cut back on budgets. A couple times we've come in and said, you guys need to cut 10% out of this proposal, but we haven't, okay? The other side of that coin is the income. What can we do to increase revenues for the town without
That's
being
right.
punitive to our residents? And
That's
there's
right.
only so many ways you can do that.
And you have to make them equal.
Right. And at some point, the long-term capital plan, Michael, goes to sand on the beach,
Yes, sir.
right? I mean, at some point, we have to start looking 3, 5, 7 years down the road. What if? What if the feds don't pay us? We've got a beach nourishment coming up this fall that the feds are paying. The town has never put a dime into beach nourishment. Okay? It's all been through the Fed, the state, and room occupancy. This one's coming up. After that, we've got 3 years to figure out a plan to get a permit and get all that extended and see if the feds are still going to pay, and if they pay, or the state's going to pay. But we need to start thinking about what if. And that's part of that long-term planning. I just don't want to, I think we're obligated as a council to do long-term planning for the community that says what if. And where
have
do
to
we get those
prepare for the
revenues?
hiccups.
Joe Dan and I went up to that deal at Pine Knoll Shores, and the second time I've seen this presentation from a fella out of Florida that does a revenue analysis on how to generate sand dollars. And they go to municipalities, and they did a couple on some of the keys in Florida, and they do these community outreaches where they go to talk to the residents, they talk to the county, they talk to the county elected officials, and they get buy-in from everybody, so it's not just Carolina Beaches writing a check. And we need to start thinking 3 to 5 years from now and be prepared for that conversation.
Did you get their number?
I haven't, yeah. And that's a county question, so I just need to understand the revenue side a little, Michael, and what we can do to
Be proactive.
enhance that or understand it so that our residents understand, because we can only go so high on utilities.
One of
That's
the
right.
things that we were going to bring back to you at the next meeting, which is May 16th, was changes to the rate and fee structures that we have. Some
Rate
of
and
the,
fee- wait, rate and fees for all rates and fees, or just development rate and fees?
every year we look at all of our rates and fees and say, okay, we have a $50 penalty for this. Does this really help us stop somebody from doing X? Or do we need to change that to $100, $200, $500, whatever it is? So we look at each one of those fees each year, and staff makes recommendations, and we bring those to you each year on changes to adjust those. So that'll be
I-
part of this.
Do you just, one of the questions that I would have is how much we've generated in civil violations revenues back to the town. Wrightsville, 2,500 people compared to 6,200 at Carolina Beach, $63,000 in civil citations into their coffer. I don't know if we're putting in 2,000 or
Right.
200,000.
I, just off the top of my head, I'd say 25 would be the max.
Right, so for me, it's not raising the rate to 250, it's just writing the checks. I mean, writing the tickets. I don't know what they, I'm just pointing these things out, I'm not advocating one way or the other, I'm just pointing out what some of our neighbors are doing, and
Right.
Well, I mean, that's smart. That's how you learn how other communities are dealing with certain
Curie
problems.
Beach,
So,
in our
I mean,
sewer authority
that's
last
good.
week, Curie Beach has a staged water cost. And they are.
Now, they had some good ideas,
They
too.
are generating, for high water users, they go to a third tier that starts gigging them. So you have a base rate, then you get to another level, and it's base plus 1. You get to another level, it's base plus 2. And what they're targeting is their high water users that are primarily rental properties, short-term rentals. So what we keep hearing, what I keep hearing from our residents is we need to make sure that we're doing as much as we can to charge the visitors that cross the bridge to help offset. When Gil tells us we have days in the summer where we're over 2 million gallons in water, Gil, what are we in the winter? So we double our water consumption. It isn't because you're, we're not showering more. It's because we have a lot more visitors, and for our residents to have to keep paying for that, we have to figure out a way proportionally to get that burden shared.
Can I bring something up on that particular note? When we did the analysis for the revenue bonds, we made recommendations on 2 different ways to go and make adjustments to the revenue collections. One was in the base fee, so it would cover the expenses for the bonds. The other was to try and build us towards a more consumption-based system. Well, at the time when we did this, we said, you know what, we're biting off an awful lot in increasing people's rates over the next 5 years by this much. Let's not do all at one time. Let's do just the enough to get us through the revenue bond expenditure. So that's what we did. My intent was to bring back to you that consumption-based model and say, here is what you could do. Remember, we talked about this. You could go to a consumption-based model, and that would put that onus on the high users rather than on the low users, which is typically, the folks that are single family or single income people, elderly, things like that. So I can bring that type of thing back to you to remind you of the discussion we had, and that could spur making some changes associated to that. But that's basically what Curry Beach is doing, is they're using a consumption-based model.
So the other question I had for you, Michael, is utility and cable franchise. Do we get any revenue?
We do. We get about $100,000.
So we need to look at that, because I could tell you another one of our beach communities is getting $400 and some thousand a year, and they're a much smaller community. So I need to understand what other people do differently, or what we're locked into that we can't renegotiate, figure something
And
out.
honestly, we stopped paying attention to cable franchise costs and how much revenue we get about 4 or 5 years ago because the state changed the regulations to where we have no say over it. All we do is get a check, and I can't tell you right now how that is calculated.
Well, let's
But I can
figure
bring
out
that
how
back to you
how
and
Wrightsville
say,
gets $400,000 a year into their annual budget on a town that's a third our size.
Maybe we could ask them Friday.
and I will
just-
find,
I'm just-
We
I will
will.
find out what the
Okay.
calculation is based off of.
Because, I mean, I will tell you this, Charter hadn't been doing any favors to some of our residents lately, trying to.
No joke.
Relocate the shop.
I
No
don't-
comment, that's a hot button.
I'm bringing up some things that I'm observing out there that we ought to try and figure
No,
out.
As
agree.
as a side note, we do not have the authority to increase or change the rates. What I can bring back to you is how they're calculating those rates and why we're getting X and somebody else is getting
Well, I would
Y.
also ask to, when you have a new home development down Wilmington Beach, and they won't bring cable 2 blocks because they haven't reached some saturation level when cable is all the way around it. It's perplexing on how they're doing stuff. So they've not been a quality, so.
And that's more along the lines
That's why I
of
have
the
a
state
record.
changing the legislation and taking that authority away from us.
Right.
We
Well,
can't
this
really
election
address
year,
it,
maybe we
but-
should ask
There you
Ted
go.
Davis what he can do to help us.
Michael, in addition to Steve's
we'll see
question,
Friday.
in addition to Steve's question about parking revenues, can you get us the number of parking passes on our vehicles that are sold locally and over the bridge, the year-round passes? How many are sold and what's generated with that sale?
Sure.
As well as what, if we increase the meters 50 cents, could rough estimate of what we think we'd make yearly on top of that?
Okay, there's a couple of different things that I can bring you back. One is going meters or pay for parking year-round. Right now, I can tell you that it would cost us about $10,000 to do that, but it would bring in another 40 after that. So it would pay for itself and bring in $40,000.
If people are
50
using
cents,
the
I can
meters.
go and do that for you easily in increments and just give you an idea of what those rates would be.
I think the people who are actually using the meters are the people who just come over. Most of the people that I know, even that live over the bridge, have bought the passes.
Well,
And they
that-
park all day long.
That's
How do
part
they buy a
of.
pass if they live over the bridge? Don't you have to get a parking pass? Don't you have to provide a?
I don't know, do you?
You can
that's-
pay
That was my question.
$75 a year and get one.
You can be a non-resident and buy a parking.
Non-
pass.
$75.
Yes,
Yeah.
we have different types of passes.
But
One
that's
is-
awful cheap to park
Well,
all year
yeah.
long.
But we can
Our
increase
lots.
all those fees.
Increase the non-resident fee.
So if we could get that number of non-resident and resident and
That-
how much they generate.
Steve, good
Not-
questions.
not
I
a
like
problem.
that. Sparked up some ideas for me. Thanks, man.
Other
Yeah,
topics
we
are.
had, Michael, a lot of this is being generated, some of it that Leanne are involved in with Lisa Wurzbacher presenting us when we get together on June 5th with numbers on a potential sales tax increase of 25 cents or 50 cents. So there's a lot of income discussions taking place for sure. Two things I need that probably shouldn't require a lot of work. Talking about the wastewater treatment facility, the timing on when we think we'll need a design when we're at 80% capacity, and then when project build at 90. This is something that yourself and Ed and I will be involved in when we get deeper into the joint land use study with our Matsu partners.
5 to 7.
One issue on that is, the state right now requires it on an annual flow rate. Okay?
Daily flow rate.
Annual.
Right, an annual average daily flow rate.
Right. And some of the regulators are trying to get it to be designed for peak season, okay? It's kind of like in July and August, there's days that we are basically already over our threshold 8%. And then there are days in November, December that, we at 20%. So it's yearly average, we're looking at about
1.4, we've been as high as 1.5.
yeah, so we got 3 big plants, so across the board average is like 50%. So we
Peak
still got
season.
30 more percent of growth before we'd actually be mandated to have even a set of plans and start into it.
We were close to when we were talking
Unless
about
they
it,
change
at
the
what point in
standard.
time we get to
There is-
the anticipated surge population, and when you're 80% there.
There is
It's not
a threshold.
always.
Yes, there is a threshold that the state uses that if you are at 80% capacity, then you need to start planning for the future. And at 90%, you better start building. And they require that, but that is based off of what Gil just mentioned of that average daily flow. So depending on whether you use the calculations currently or what the regulators might want to changes when we might need to do that.
So,
Our-
Joe, the issue is, during the summer, we're well above where we should be to not start planning. We don't have to by regulation, we don't have to because we're such a volatile deal. But some of the regulators, as Gil was saying, is, guys, that's a false assumption. You are over your capacity in the summer. Don't you think it would be wise to plan for that capacity?
Because of our location.
And hence my question when we're talking about capital outlays and capital improvement plans.
Gil,
And
we were talking about 20 million bucks, weren't you?
At least.
I mean, if you're over it consistently 4 months a year, we really need to
those
be
are,
planning.
you know, and those are discussions we're going to need for the joint land use study because it's going to take us into the time at which we need to.
Of course, yes, sir.
I mean,
And that's all.
right now, today, there are wastewater plants that are more efficient than the one that was put in the 1940s, okay? We're actually going to be looking at a couple different things to bring back to the council. If we had to put in a 4 million gallon plant, do we want to have the same kind of system we have today? Or do we want to put in a more efficient system that we can run with less electricity, more efficient, meets more
Right.
standards and state limits? All that information we're trying to gather is being proactive.
Right.
Again, like Steve's saying, there's times when, in July and August, when we are at that threshold that we need to be doing, having some stuff drawn on paper. But again,
Annually.
one thing that's actually helped us is the previous council and then some of the council that's carried forth. And the same mentality that you guys got is keeping on addressing the infrastructure. The last thing I think Brian Cox sent back to us is we'd removed 132 to 135,000 gallons a day of groundwater just by the infrastructure we've done. That would, so that takes away from that plant flow that gives some
Yeah.
potential growth.
All the intrusion in all these pipes
Yes.
is being
So,
stopped.
And that's one of the focuses for 15 years that was kind of not addressed here, was the failing infrastructure, and it's kind of like out of sight, out of mind. And then that put people like Bill Raymond and Chris Nichols that run pump stations and Letizia of every time we had a storm event, they struggled just to address and keep up with the storm event. It wasn't the treatment of the sewer, it was the inflow filtration. Because every time, like Kerr Beach has done better, but every time we have a rain event, we get a substantial impact from Kerr Beach, just like we mentioned the other day in the Water Sewer Authority.
Yeah.
So as we continue to do these infrastructure projects, it's one bad way of saying this, we're trying to prevent from expanding that wastewater plant, because that's a major, major undertaking. From the time you start engineering to actually build, it'd probably take 3 years at the rate they're going right now, and would Matsu allow?
Yeah.
Okay? Can we lower the footprint at Matsu and improve our wastewater system? Yes, we can, but we're going to have to change several things at the wastewater plant. That's going to take time and money. How much? I can't tell you right now, but I will be projecting that to you very short.
Other items?
So tied, and tied to that, Gil, that's good. So the joint land use study is going to have recommendations only. But if there's an impact to us one way or the other, Anita Bullock was her name. She works at the Office of Economic Activity that provides, there's this funding stream for municipalities that assumes some of the recommendations. Hence my question, getting out in front of this, that we can be compensated for a portion of our infrastructure changes based on what the joint land use study publishes.
Right.
And I meet with her in 2 weeks. And we'll see her again at the public meeting. That's all I have.
Other items that you want brought up at the next meeting?
Not off the top of my head.
Okay, question I have for you is the next meeting is the 16th of May. It's from 9 to 12. My intent was to bring you back some information about the individual administrative department budgets and where the changes are associated to those, significant changes. Bring you back the rates and fees information and get you or try to get you some of this information that you're wanting for questions. Is 3 hours going to be enough for you to get through this information, or do you want to make that meeting longer?
I'll leave my time frame open for you guys. I'm here for you.
I want to be able to provide you with what you want, but don't know how long you want to take these. I mean,
Sometimes there's a point in time when too much time is
and
not good.
and yes, and basically,
Tom said he's
we've
bringing
left
lunch
it
for
at,
us.
Unless I'm going up to DC, I gotta.
we've left it at 3 hours.
I'll
So
bring a bunch of, granola bars.
Who else is presenting that day?
it's probably just going to be me.
Thank God. We'll just get all the time to pick on you, Michael.
I try and take some of the load
What is
from
it,
the staff.
planning? I mean, who's on the 16th?
That would be me presenting the administrative departments, planning, executive, clerk,
So that
legislative.
shouldn't be too long.
No, it's not. And it's just going to be high-level overview. Here's some changes associated to those because there's
But
not a
then
lot
you're
of
gonna bring
changes.
stuff to answer the questions we brought up today.
And then we're going to talk about rates and fees and then try and answer these
Well,
questions.
let's just do it. We got 4 hours on that day.
All right.
Tom's about bringing lunch.
Thank you so much.
If you
I'll
have
come back another day.
if you have questions that pop in your head, please email them to me so I know what they are.
Yes, sir.
So I
Just
can
gonna
be
go home,
prepared
draw
when
the
we come in.
shade, Light a candle.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good day,
Sleep
everybody.
whenever.
Yeah.
We've done that before.
Now, cheer up,
We've done that before.
Mark.
We're gonna leave, yeah.
cheer up.